Welcome to the Alex Jones Show on this Friday, December 2nd, 2016. I am David Knight, your host. In the next segment, we're going to have a special report from Alex talking about Trump's victory tour. And yet, the Democrats still don't get it. Later in the hour, we're going to have a report about how they're still trying to steal the election. We've had the very first returns come in from Wisconsin, and guess what? Hillary Clinton picked up a net of 1. Donald Trump lost 2 votes in the recount in the first local area where they brought in the results. Donald Trump lost 1, and 2 rather, and Hillary Clinton lost 1, so she gained 1 vote on him. So now she's 19,999 votes behind him. This is incredibly stupid. And it comes at the time that we see Democrat donors telling the party, hey, we're done with this. Don't call me anymore about money. You're simply wasting this. They're also moving to try to put in Keith Ellison as in a leadership position of the DNC because they're still on this identity politics kick. They don't understand the last election. They can't accept and won't accept the results. We're also going to take a look at more information about the Trump carrier deal. You know, the more I look at this, the more I like it. I don't like government handing out special favors to large companies. I want the government there to create a level playing field that is conducive to business. That means you get rid of regulation. You get rid of taxation that is not necessary, but especially these regulations that are an incredible burden. As we pointed out last night, we've got a President-elect Trump who is saving jobs, doing things that Obama never would, that Obama said, hey, I'd need a magic wand, not just my pen and my phone to do this. I'd need a magic wand to do it. And yet a president-elect who is not going to take office for another 49 days, but it was about 50 days out when he did this, saved these jobs from moving. And what is Obama doing? He's enacting scores of regulations. He already, I guess it was well before Thanksgiving, I think we had the story about how he'd hit a record number of regulations this year. But then they said, hey, he's still got a couple of months left, and he is pushing really hard. Just 100 of the scores, well, it's not scores, it's probably thousands of regulations that they're trying to push through, but the 100 top ones would add about $2 billion of crushing debt to us. We got a story here about how new EPA rules will push their costs past $1 trillion for American persons, okay? That's $3,000 charge, one-time charge per person in America, every man, woman, and child. That's the legacy of Obama. And as I look at this carrier situation, it's interesting to go back and look at the beginning of this year when Carrier first announced that they were going to move. Not only did Obama mock Trump, but it was also an amazing failure. And we didn't talk about this yesterday. An amazing failure of the kind of stimulus packages that Obama put out there. He had actually given massive stimulus to this very company to create green jobs. See, there's a difference in the priorities. He wants to prioritize his green jobs when what we really need are American jobs. They don't have most, as Trump pointed out, he heaped scorn on the idea that we're going to give tax breaks and special incentives to companies, which I think is a very healthy thing. I don't think Donald Trump gave any direct subsidies to Carrier. Yes, Indiana did, and it wasn't much. It was $7 million to save 1,000 jobs over a 10-year period. That's $700 per employee per year. They're going to pay more than that just in income taxes. And then Carrier is going to invest $16 million. So that's 2.5 times that subsidy invested in there. And that doesn't count all the money that is still going to flow into that economy and go to all the people that are interacting and serving these people that these people are going to be buying goods and services from. I see so many different ways that they're trying to soft sell this and say, well, you know, we really can't really, it's not really 1,000 jobs because it's really only 800 union jobs because the rest of these are like engineering and clerical stuff. It's like, well, white collar jobs count too. That's the bottom line. He saved 1,000 jobs. He says we're going to do it by lowering regulations and lowering taxes. That's a great bit of news there. Stay with us when we come back. Alex is going to talk about Donald Trump's victory tour and his quote that we don't have a global flag, a global currency, and no global citizenship. We're Americans.
Something truly remarkable is happening on President-elect Donald J. Trump's victory tour around the United States. He is fulfilling his promise to continue to use the bully pulpit to promote the idea that is coffin nails to the unelected tyrannical system of globalism and global government. He is talking about Americanism versus globalism and is continuing to define it as a competing system to the unelected global system. And he breaks down how it makes us totally alone, with no culture, with no flag, with no shared values, how it attacks family, how it attacks individualism, how it takes our identity away. And that's why globalism cannot allow the nation state or the family or even religious freedom to operate, because free, open societies compete with it in a way that it cannot survive. Trump is simplifying this. He's not dumbing it down, because he's bringing something back to a culture and back to a world that for 50 years has seen it eradicated. But this is truly sunshine being brought back into the world. He also talks about how, and this is the one area he's wrong, that Obama and our leaders don't know what they're doing with these political systems they've set up. But then he goes on to admit that they've sold us out to special interest. And he tells the truth there. They have parlayed our entire industrial and cultural and scientific base that the military-industrial complex took over in the 50s and 60s. Once they took control of it, the globalists exported it overseas as contingent for global corporations to take control of India, China, Mexico, and 160 plus other nations. But once this global plan is public, as I keep hammering, it's over. And the enemy has thought that we were so stupid, so dumbed down, that they wrote it in constant publications over the last 60 years. Hell, the New York Times back in the 50s would have big, huge cover stories promoting 10 regions of the U.S., 10 regions of the world, and 3 super regions, and pitching a FEMA control arm and COG for every nation state to be controlled by the central technocracy, the technocracy movement of the 20s. So what we're facing is a Goldman Sachs technocracy movement launched in the 20s. Rob Jacobs has done detailed reports on this, so have our other reporters, but in future reports I'm going to lay out from their own writings exactly what globalism is and how it's being established. But it's the scientific implementation of the British Empire model corporately on the world. Now, to be clear, it's not the British that are doing it. In fact, you see the British pulling out of it. It is a model that corporations have combined forces to create. So this is an amazing time to be alive. Americanism, not globalism. And Trump goes on to say, we're not going to penalize other countries. We're going to create a two-way street, a win-win, not a one-way street. And again, globalism is about breaking the West, not letting us be dominant so the globalists can be dominant. They're not lowering us in some mass political correctness like they push on the surface to unify the world. They're not trying to raise the third world. They're trying to lower us to that level. They're trying to install authoritarianism in. I was just reading in The Economist yesterday and a bunch of other big publications. They were pushing China's authoritarianism and saying, look at how messy American, quote, democracy is, how dangerous it is that we have Trump, because now the whole global system is in disarray. Now, before I go to this powerful excerpt of Trump's speech yesterday, it's posted in full on INFOWARS.com, I want to warn everyone. We're winning the war right now, but we've not won the overall complete war. We're winning battles. They're going to strike back. We were already on the verge of a global collapse next year that they plan to use to bring in total control, in their own words. Will they still launch it, knowing that Trump will expose they're the ones behind it? Do they think we're stupid enough to actually buy that the collapse is our fault if they still pull it? These are the big questions. But my friends, we have seen the technocrats sell out our country and sell out our world. They have seen, the people have seen and witnessed the incredible, unprecedented corruption. And so, again, now that we're ideologically actually have a culture that is the Renaissance culture, and the fact that that's being rediscovered on a planetary scale will be the end of these people if we continue to promote it. That's why MSM, dinosaur-controlled media, continues to act like there's no such thing as globalism, no such thing as technocracy, no such thing as EU bureaucrats or the Davos Forum or the Bilderberg Group, because if they ever admit it exists and they ever admit it's ongoing, and if we ever read their white papers, which they think the general public are too too dumb to actually look into, it's game over. So now is the education period to re-put out films on Bilderberg, to put out fact sheets with links to globalist statements and white papers admitting planetary, unelected, tyrannical government. Now is the time to reach out to people because Trump and Nigel Farage and Putin and others are making it safe again to tell the truth and expose the real paradigm, the bullying of anyone trying to expose the New World Order like myself or Ron Paul or Barry Goldwater or Anthony Sutton or Ronald Reagan early on or Matt Drudge or Joseph Farah or any of the trailblazers. That bullying failed thanks to your courage, the listeners of this broadcast. And know this, INFOWARS is the main ground troop, hard-charging organization that actually has the fire-breathing patriots that will not back down. You are the shock troops. You are the special forces of the fight against the New World Order, and I salute you all as well as the amazing crew. I'll say this in closing and then go to this excerpt of Trump's historic speech. He talks about world leaders that he talked to, and one in particular that finally said he respects America again because of what the American people did, because it was honorable. It was what made us great. I don't know that it was Putin, but I know Putin's made similar statements to his press, so I bet you my bottom dollar it was Vladimir Putin that said that. America can take the moral high ground again, and folks some of them are second-guessing Trump on some of his appointments. I'm going to trust him until he actually gets into power, until we see what he actually starts doing, because so far he's been delivering before he's even president, in office, only president-elect, and he's delivering in the info war, causing irrevocable damage to the globalist system by pointing out what a giant, oppressive, unelected, disgusting fraud it is. Here is Donald Trump yesterday in one of his victory speeches. Americanism, not globalism, delivered.
For too long, Washington has tried to put us in boxes. They separate us by race, by age, by income, by geography, by place of birth. We spend too much time focusing on what divides us. Now is the time to embrace the one thing that truly unites us. You know what that is? America, America. It's America. Because when America is unified, nothing is beyond our reach. I mean that. You're going to see. You're going to see. We're going to have a country that was never so great. You watch, in so many different ways. You hear a lot of talk about how we're becoming a globalized world. But the relationships people value in this country are local. Family, city, state, country, they're local. We'll compete in the world. We want to compete in the world. But we're going to compete in the world where it's a two-way road, not a one-way road. The advantages are going to come back to our country, and they haven't for many, many years. There is no global anthem, no global currency, no certificate of global citizenship. We pledge allegiance to one flag, and that flag is the American flag. From now on, it's going to be America first, okay? America first. We're going to put ourselves first. We seek peace and harmony with the nations of the world, but that means recognizing the right of every country, including our own, to look after its citizens. We would put other countries first. We had people running our country that truly didn't know what the hell they were doing, okay? Didn't know what they were doing. We're going to defend the American worker. Look what's happened right here. They forgot about the American worker. They forgot that it was the American worker who truly built our country. We are not going to forget, believe me. One of the reasons we're so divided today is because our government has failed to protect the interests of the American workers and their families, making it too easy for us to see ourselves as distinct groups and not unified as a whole. We're not unified. We're going to be. Washington's politicians have spent so long appealing to competing interests, they've forgotten how to appeal to the national interest, combining the skills and talents of our people in a common cause. And we have unbelievable talent. But that is all about to change. Our goal is to strengthen the bonds of trust between citizens, to restore our sense of membership in a shared national community. Global is wonderful, but right now we want to focus on our national community. Never again will anyone's interests come before the interests of the American people. It's not going to happen again. And over the last 2 weeks, since our victory, I've spoken to many foreign leaders. And I will tell you, they have such respect for us. They all tell me how this was amazing. They all tell me how they sat in their magnificent rooms in different countries throughout the world. These are the leaders, the prime ministers, the presidents, all of them. How they sat in their magnificent rooms watching in wonderment and hearing how people came to vote that didn't vote in 20 years. People came to vote that haven't voted before. And they had Trump shirts on, and they had Make America Great hats on, and they had buttons pouring off. And they thought it was amazing. And honestly, one of them told me, I truly respect the United States again because of what happened.
The President-elect of the United States of America, Donald Trump.
We have a lot to be thankful for with Mr. Trump, a lot to celebrate. The fact that globalism and political correctness is being exposed. The fact that he isn't even in office yet, and now Carrier is staying in Indiana, Ford is staying in Kentucky, and even Apple's talking about moving some of their factories back to the United States from the facilities they run in nightmare conditions in China. Yes, I'm thankful for Trump and the march of nationalism from Le Pen in France to, of course, great leaders like Nigel Farage in the UK and Vladimir Putin in Russia. Human destiny is awakening. But I'm not just thankful for Trump. I'm also thankful to God that we dodged the bullet that is Hillary Rodham Clinton.
All right, welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight here in the studio on this Friday, December 2nd, 2016. In the next segment, the bottom of the hour, we're going to have another report from Alex Jones talking about what's going on with this phony recount. We've seen now the very first results of this. As I point out at the top of the hour, Hillary Clinton has picked up one vote. She was 22,000 votes behind Donald Trump. Now she is 21,199 votes behind Donald Trump. It is such a massive waste and misallocation of resources, as the entire Hillary Clinton campaign was, that we see these articles from Democrat donors telling losing party that they're not giving any more after it burned through their millions with nothing to show for it. And they're still burning through millions. And now we got Jill Stein joining in this vanity project that she has going on, and also raising money for her own process there. This is absolutely amazing. And so Alex is going to break this down. Later on in the show, we're going to be talking to a European journalist, which I find very interesting because I didn't realize this connection yesterday when I talked about what happened on Wednesday. You know, we had this report yesterday when I talked about it. They're saying that Russia weaponized social media. This is a narrative that's been put out by a cyber company that's not doing too well, actually a FireEye, but it was put out by Bloomberg and picked up by a lot of the news services that social media was weaponized by Russia. So if you retweeted that information that came out from WikiLeaks showing the criminal conspiracies within the DNC, within the Hillary Clinton campaign, the collusion between the media, the criminal actions of the Clinton Foundation, if you put that out there, It wasn't you passing along information about corruption. No, that was Russia weaponizing social media. And so in response to that, on Wednesday, as we see this fake news narrative building, we had the American House pass overwhelmingly. It was 330 some odd votes to 30, only 30 against it, saying they're going to organize against fake news, okay? The same thing happened exactly 1 week before in the European Union. You understand that the independent media is what is taking down, is educating people. People are able to share this information back and forth on social media. We have independent journalists across the world that are exposing what's happening here. And as people wake up and see what the globalists are doing to them, they're revolting across the globe, just as we had Gerald Celente yesterday saying there's an election coming up in Italy. I mean, it's happening all through these European countries as well. And so what do? They push back and they say it's going to be Russia. The Germans have already said Russia's going to hack our elections. The same stuff we heard here. There's no evidence of that. Jill Stein says there's no evidence of anything happening, but I think we ought to look anyway. But she was never there when it came to voter fraud, when it came to electronic voting machine fraud. She never had anything to say. No, that's not what this is about. I welcome any efforts to try to correct that. What she is doing is not trying to correct it. She's just trying to interfere with this election. But understand that as the U.S. House passed this on Wednesday to come along with this fake news narrative and say we're going to do something about it, it's going to still go before the Senate. 1 week before, the European Parliament did the same thing. So we're going to talk to a journalist coming up in the second hour, Philippe Larouth. He's from the International Federation of Journalists. And, of course, RT interviewed him because they're in the crosshairs. They're being accused of being a propaganda organization. How do you define propaganda? Should we have a free marketplace of ideas? But you understand that it's no coincidence that this legislation was introduced in the European Parliament and then 1 week later the U.S. House put it in there. Because this is coming from the globalists. This is their pushback. Their fake news pushback that they're coming against us. And as we look at what's happening with Breitbart, and this is something we need to really pay close attention to. We pointed it out yesterday. Kellogg said we're going to blackball Breitbart. Sorry, saying that we're not going to have ads on their site. And so Breitbart came back and said, well, let's take a look at what their values are. Their values are they are involved in child labor so they can get palm oil to stick in your sugar cereal. But it's even worse than that. On InfoWars today, we see a story that Kellogg Foundation shares values with BLM, Black Lives Matter. It's a radical organization that they gave $1 million to. So their values are not Breitbart, but their values are Black Lives Matter. So they're not even going to allow their ads to appear on Breitbart's site, but they will give $1 million to Black Lives Matter. And then we look at this story here from WorldNet Daily. 47 U.S. companies are being pushed to join this Breitbart blacklist and push back against Trump. See this picture here? Does that look familiar? Okay, it's Black Lives Matter, the black fist, but of course, we've also seen that in a white color for white power. We've also seen it in a red color for the communists. And the guy who's doing this has a Twitter account. He's an anonymous user. We don't know who this guy exactly is. He calls it Sleeping Giants, and he is attempting to take it down by taking screenshots of various companies that have advertised on Breitbart, put it on Twitter, and try to organize pressure against individual companies to blacklist Breitbart. This is a very organized campaign, folks. They're coming at us economically. They're coming at us legislatively. It is not just America, but it is Europe. We're going to talk to him, and also in the second hour, we're going to be talking to someone about a move against medical freedom in Texas, of all places, and it may be coming to your state as well. We're going to take a look at how that's being played out here in Texas. She'll be here with us in the studio. So stay with us. We'll be right back with Alex Jones.
Alex Jones here reporting for InfoWars.com on the ongoing attempt by the Democratic Party that's controlled by an offshore consortium of large central banks and corporations to overthrow the will of the American people and steal the election for Hillary Rodham Clinton. Now, a lot of people think this is impossible. I've been warning for 3 weeks since Trump won the election that they would try something like this because they never give up. They were blindsided election night because they were attempting to steal the election and clearly stole 5 states from Trump. And all the election fraud that was going on, according to Bev Harris, pointed towards fraud against Trump and the populist movement. So they were so stunned that they knew they couldn't contest it that night. So they plan to try to contest it later or basically assassinate Trump or claim that he's involved in some sort of corruption. And they see this as a win-win. Even if they're unable to overturn Trump's election, which I still think is 90% improbable, they still believe they're winning because they're able to, quote, delegitimize Trump and make it look like that he basically shouldn't be president ahead of a move to then try to impeach him or remove him down the road. So this is just all part of their war against nationalism and war against the people's will. Now that said, INFOWARS.com, I'm very proud of it, and our reporters have been on the very cutting edge of exposing the fact that Jill Stein was only going after states that Donald Trump won, the fact that it was Democratic Party donors that were giving the money, the fact that internally they planned to discredit the election, the fact that they were planning to get 15 electors. We reported on this 2 weeks ago, 15 electors to not go for Trump, that they'll then use scandals that they're going to announce right around the 19th and the 20th to say the reason they're not going for Trump is because the recounts show anomalies and because Trump's racist and all the regular garbage. So they're just pre-preparing all of this for the public to at least try to dissuade the American people from continuing to push for Americanism, not globalism, and the restoration of our sovereignty, and to also further scramble and destabilize the inauguration that should be a celebration of the return of our national sovereignty coming up January 20th. So we've got all of that unfolding, all of that happening, and now Tucker Carlson, who I really got to give credit to, and I want to be clear. I mean, I think that Megyn Kelly looks like a man in drag now. She's so unfeminine. She's quite frankly so pretentious, so angry, so establishment, so sycophantic. I can't watch her now. She's like Hillary Clinton. I have been basically conditioned to become nauseous when I see her face. And the reason I raise that point is most of the hosts on Fox make me sick. Bill O'Reilly, you name it. The only good shows are Fox and Friends and Tucker Carlson. And I don't say that about Tucker Carlson because, you know, he's a friend of the show, has come on the broadcast, and we've had dinner before, and he's a fellow patriot. I say it because he's the best thing on Fox now other than Lou Dobbs, and he's had the courage to really go where other people won't go on Fox now. And so other than Donald Trump coming on as a guest, Tucker Carlson is the best thing on Fox. And I think it's a very good sign that Fox realizes their coup against the Patriots via the election and via that made-up stuff about Roger Ailes failed. And because that now failed, they're being forced, because of ratings dropping, to go back to more of an Americana-based format. And I think Tucker Carlson being given a prime time slot now on Fox at 7 o'clock Eastern is an extremely, extremely positive thing. Because look, Tucker Carlson 6, 7, 8 years ago wasn't perfect. Nobody is. But he just gets better and better. He's so articulate. He's so hardcore. And the reason I wanted to take some time out to single him out as the best thing on Fox is because we need to promote in media, period, patriots, and give them support when they do tell the truth. And I think Lou Dobbs should be brought to main Fox. I mean, he's just incredibly smart, incredibly talented, incredibly patriotic, incredibly dedicated to this restoration of our republic. But that said, the reason I raise him is I notice every day, 2 or 3 times, we have stories that we put out on INFOWARS.com and PrisonPlanet.com where Tucker Carlson is just blowing it out of the water. I mean, he is knocking it out of the park with hardcore interviews that expose what's happening. And it's good to see an hour, basically, of INFOWARS-style media on Fox every day, because I'm not in competition against a Matt Drudge or a Tucker Carlson or a Lou Dobbs. I hope they become bigger than I am. I want to defeat the New World Order. This is about restoring the republic for my children and your children. Now, that said, let's get to the latest piece of news that's on INFOWARS.com from Tucker Carlson that dovetails with Paul Watson's deep research. He had Sean Duffy, Republican from Wisconsin, on yesterday, who has been inside the recounts happening in that state and others, and they have confirmed that it is the Democrats that are basically slowing down the recount on purpose. This is key, slowing down the recount on purpose so that they will be able to then say it isn't finished coming up on December 13th, and then they won't be ready on the 19th to have the electors meet. The deadline is the 13th for that recount to be done, and if it's not done, they can then just say that those electors do not go to Trump, putting his election into question, to put the country into turmoil and further destabilization, one that the Ford Foundation and, of course, people like George Soros have been pushing. So here's the article. Congressman Dems stalling recount in Wisconsin to steal electoral votes from Trump. They want to use politics to undermine the will of the voter. Congressman Sean Duffy told Fox News Tucker Carlson the Democrats are trying to stall the vote recount in Wisconsin so that it not be completed before December 13th deadline, robbing Donald Trump of the electoral votes of that state. And it's the model in other states as well. They're doing this. All the votes in Wisconsin have to be certified by December 13th before electors meet on December 19th to formally cast their votes. Now, the reason this is so important is Jill Stein knows full well that she got Democratic Party donor money to do this. And she knows full well that she only picked 5 states that Trump won and that they thought was narrow victories, even though some states were 70,000, like Pennsylvania. They know full well what they're pulling is meant to overthrow this election. They know full well it's very nasty and very, very dastardly what they're up to. And when they sit there and claim that they're not trying to overturn the people's will, it's a fraud. She's up there lying all over TV, all over radio, all over the place, saying this isn't the case, when it clearly is the case. And this is the same, Democratic Party that she's basically working for now that stole the election from Bernie Sanders in the primary. So more election fraud in front of us by these criminals. They're brazen, they're naked, they mean business. Here is a clip of that report from Fox News, and then we'll go back to David Knight from the Central Texas News Center, INFOWARS.com. Thank you all for your support and prayers.
To follow up on what Alex Jones was saying, we've taken a lot of heat, and of course they tried to attack Donald Trump by attacking Alex, saying that we think that there was voter fraud here. We don't think. We know. We've had reports from multiple states about this. False voters, and we've also talked about voting machine fraud. We've had Bev Harris and others who have spent their entire career, not just one political party. We've had Democrats and Republicans who look at the integrity of the voting system, talking about all these issues, and we were slammed as conspiracy theorists. Tinfoil hat, all of this stuff before the election. And yet now they are using the same narrative as well. But I want to look at this story here from the Daily Mail, for example. They say Trump is right that illegal voting hit the presidential election, say experts. And then they say, even if it wasn't in the millions, his critics have not proven that he was wrong. Now, what they say is that, he's vilified, of course, and continues to have special reports put out attacking him by CNN for saying that he thinks that he won the popular vote because they've been padding the vote. We saw the vote totals continue to go up for like 3 weeks after the election was over, from certain suspect areas, cities, and states. But they pointed out that, as CNN called it bogus, Washington Post said that, pants on fire by Politico. But they said experts warn that the rapid media condemnation of the president-elect is itself flawed. And he was right, at least partially. Well, let's take a look at what they say. They say, and we'll go back to this clip. We've got that clip ready in just a moment. Let me just finish this report here. The 2013 study was conducted by a man named Jesse Richmond, a professor in Virginia, the Old Dominion University. It was based on surveys by the Cooperative Congressional Election Studies in 2008 and 10. They asked respondents for their citizen status, and then they just asked them if you voted. So these people say, yeah, I'm not a citizen, but yeah, I did vote. Okay, in 2008 and 2010, they just admitted it. Okay, how many people would be smart enough to not answer that question truthfully, you might ask yourself. And that's one of the key things. When we talk about undocumented immigrants or the term, even illegal aliens, neither one of those terms really do it justice. Let's just say that they are citizens of a foreign country who are here illegally in defiance of our laws, and these citizens of foreign countries are voting in our elections. Now, they say based on that data that they took of that survey done by the Cooperative Congressional Election Studies of 2008-10, they saw about 6.4% of non-citizens voted in the 2008 election. So they said, well, that would probably get about, a million or so of the votes that Hillary says she has, a 2.2 million. Like, I say they don't know, because he's just estimating that 80% of those people would have voted for Obama against John McCain. What is the estimate, you think, of these foreign citizens coming here voting against Donald Trump? And, of course, there's more of them there. So that's the bottom line. This is not something that we can go through and say this person, this person, this person. But when we go through and we see situations where false voter rolls are turned in with dead officials recognized in a Virginia county, a dead official there. We see the governor of Virginia robo-signing pardons for prisoners so that he can get 60,000 of them to vote. And guess what? She won by 60,000 in Virginia. What do you think? Isn't that interesting? Let's go to that clip of Tucker Carlson. We got that ready now.
Wildly angry.
I think everybody is in favor of recounts if there's a suggestion that the election was crooked, of course, and you should be. But if there's no evidence or even a suggestion of evidence that there was anything wrong with the election at all in the state of Wisconsin, how can there be a recount? On what basis? And who made that decision?
Well, our law allows that even though Jill Stein got 1% of the vote in Wisconsin, if she raises the money and pays for the recount, she's obliged to get a recount from the state. Now, the counties have the option: do they actually use their voting vote count machines, or do they do a hand count?
Right.
Well, virtually everyone said we're going to use the voting machines. Dane County, the progressives that love Jill Stein and the Communist Party, they're the ones who said, no, we're going to slow walk this, and we are going to count by hand. And the projections that we have on the ground right now is that it'll take more than 20 days, Tucker. It'll put us past December 20th, which is the date these votes have to come in for the electors, which is the 19th. We won't have a certification in Wisconsin, which is their intent. We might have to use the courts.
Interesting.
Yeah, that's their intent, to mess with the Electoral College. See, this is, I think this is really tortious interference. We got Lionel coming on in the third hour, so maybe we should ask him, as a former lawyer and prosecutor, is this qualify for tortious? Well, it certainly is torturous interference if it's not tortious interference. I think that when you have a candidate who has less than 1% of the vote, she should not be allowed to be a stalking horse or a shill for another candidate who doesn't have the courage and the backbone to come out and show herself as a sore loser. And we know that Hillary certainly was sore on election night. And since then, we've had reports that she's been trying to drown her sorrows from an insider. But we don't know that for sure. But I wouldn't be surprised if that were true. But, when we look at the debates and we look at third parties, and I think Jill Stein and I would say Gary Johnson have done a great disservice to the cause of multi-party elections that I support in this particular election, the way the two of them have behaved, the way they have come across, but especially Jill Stein now. I think this has been even worse than Gary Johnson and his just not even being informed about basic issues, looking totally stupid and irrelevant. We should talk about totally irrelevant. It's Jill Stein. Here's a person who has gotten less than 1% of the vote. She has absolutely no standing to do this, quite frankly. And I think that we ought to include people into the debates if they get on enough ballots, because it's very difficult to get on the ballots. That's I think, a problem with our electoral system. It's very difficult to get on the ballots, but if you've got enough broad spread support to get on the ballot in enough states to win the election, or let's say set the bar pretty high, say if you're on the ballot in all 50 states, you should be allowed to participate in the debates. But I would say that we ought to have some kind of a rule to say that you're not going to do these kind of frivolous recounts just to interfere with the election if you don't really have standing, if you don't really have a chance to win. Interesting that in North Carolina, where there really is a very tight race, and there really is evidence of voter fraud on the Democrat side in the gubernatorial race, you had the heavily Democrat county, Durham County, as I've mentioned before, extended their election for an hour and a half, and then at midnight they came in with 100,000 votes, and guess what? They completely flipped everything over from the incumbent Republican being ahead to the challenging Democrat, and there's less than 5,000 votes last time I looked at between these two. and they're trying to do a recount in Durham. Meanwhile, these same lawyers, these same Democrat lawyers are saying, well, we need to shut down this recount in North Carolina. No, that's where it really needs to be looked at carefully. And they need to look at carefully at that one county, heavily skewed. It's like 4.5 times the number of Democrat votes to Republican votes there. The most you'll see anywhere else skewed to one party was 2.5 times or 2.6 or something as I looked at the different counties. But in Durham County, heavily Democrat, they extend their hours. They mess with the election. Then when we try to do a recount, they say, no, we're not going to take a look at that. I want to move on from the election news to take a look again at this Trump carrier deal. Because as I pointed out yesterday, the devil is in the details. How did they do this? Okay, we've got the Mexican official really upset in the city where this plant was going. He says, this is a banana republic. This is a deal worthy of a banana republic. And I thought it was interesting, not that he said that, but I thought it was interesting that Yahoo News would put in here to try to say, look, Mexico's really not benefiting disproportionately from NAFTA against the U.S. Listen to this paragraph here. They say Mexican economic growth averaged 2.6% in the 22 years since NAFTA took effect in 1994, compared with 2.5% for the far wealthier United States, according to the World Bank. That has nothing to do with it. The size of our economies and how our economies have grown have nothing to do with it. It's really about the trade deficit. We had a rough parity. Some years we would be ahead. Some years Mexico would be ahead before NAFTA. So it was essentially a wash. We would see deficits of like, plus or minus $2 to $5 billion a year. As soon as NAFTA was passed, that trade deficit soared to $15 billion. Never went down less than $15 billion. Went up to $75 billion per year in some years. That's the issue. Now, when we come back, I want to compare what the job stealer in chief, Obama, is still trying to do in his last 50 days. He's still trying to put chains on the American economy as we got Trump, who's not even president yet, saving jobs. We're going to talk about that in detail when we come back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, your host. As I pointed out earlier, we're going to have the former president of the International Federation of Journalists. He is current president of the International Federation of Journalists. He's been the former vice president of the European Federation of Journalists from 2004 to 2013, almost 10 years. Before that, he was president of the Belgian Association of Professional Journalists from 1995 to 2005. He's going to be talking to us about the developing censorship using this narrative of fake news and propaganda that is happening in Europe. It's not just here in America. And of course, 1 week after the European Parliament passed a bill saying we're going to push back and come after Russia because of their propaganda, we have seen the same thing get pushed through the U.S. Congress on the House side. It still hasn't gone through the Senate. And as the Washington Post reports, it sounds just like it was a story written in Europe, effort to combat foreign propaganda, advances in Congress. We're going to talk about how dangerous that is. This is a guy who's been a journalist for 61 years in Europe. And he's been president and vice president of the 3 major organizations there. Currently president of the International Federation of Journalists. He's going to be talking to us in the next hour about this very dangerous situation as there's a globalist push against freedom of the press. Now, real quickly, as we're talking about freedom of the press, and we've talked about the Breitbart blacklisting that is being done by an anonymous Twitter user who's trying to create these blacklists, and he got Kellogg to sign on to it. Kellogg, who gave $1 million to Black Lives Matter, but they're still pushing this and trying to get other companies to do this. We support our operation here with the products that we sell. And as I said yesterday, we try to offer you healthy things, things that will help you to recover. Even if you eat Kellogg's cereal, you can recover with some of these nutrients and supplements. And I'm going to be talking also to somebody in the next hour with a statewide organization here in Texas talking about the pressure that is being put on chiropractors, naturopaths, and even people selling natural supplements here in Texas, going even beyond what the FDA does. So we have to fight for our freedom in multiple ways. One of the ways that we do that here at InfoWars is try to offer you the best products. A good example of this, I think, is DNA Force, that you'll find at InfoWarsLife.com. DNA Force is a unique supplement. It has BioPQQ. It's a compound backed by 175 clinical studies, very hard to secure, very expensive to acquire and to produce, But that's not all that's in it. Okay, that's just one of 9 powerful ingredients. It's got other things like CoQ10, digestive enzymes, resveratrol, and many other things. But just one of these ingredients, BioPQQ, cost $30,000 per batch. This is something that if you read these studies, take a look at the information we have there at InfoWarsLife.com, take a look at the reviews, but especially the clinical studies. We back this stuff up. You can understand how important this can be for your nutritional health. And it is vitally important to keep us free and independent from corporate sponsors as we fight this move against freedom of the press. So thank you for supporting us. In the time I've got left in this hour, I want to talk real quickly about this carrier deal and what this shows us. Now, we see as the details emerged, we saw that, yes, there was some money given to Carrier. $7 million by the state of Indiana, not by the federal government, not by the U.S. taxpayers. President Trump is not president yet. He's president-elect right now. So if you look at that, though, that's over a 10-year period for 1,000 workers. That works out to $700 a worker. That's going to be less than they're going to pay in taxes, not to mention the effect that it has throughout their community. But the interesting thing, I think, is when Donald Trump talked about this deal last night, he mocked politicians who offer low-interest loans and tax abatements to keep factories in the United States. He said these companies don't even need the money, most of them. And he said they take the money. There were a couple of instances where geniuses with great lawyers gave them money and then they moved away. You know what? One of those instances was Carrier itself. Obama gave them green subsidies, and they were going to close their factory because they didn't care about blue-collar jobs, only their green idols. Stay with us. We'll talk more about this on the other side of the break. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. We're going to be talking to Philippe Larouth, the current president of the International Federation of Journalists. He has 61 years experience as a European journalist, and he's going to be joining us to talk about this massive move against freedom of the press, labeling anybody that opposes a globalist agenda, calling them propagandists for Russia. The same thing is happening in Europe that is happening here. So we need to be aware that this is a global response to a global movement pushing back against globalism. This is what Trump is about. It's what Brexit was about, and we've got elections coming up this weekend. So he's going to be joining us in the next segment. Real quickly, I want to go back to what I was talking about this Carrier deal. I think it's very telling. Now, this Washington Post story that I was just talking about, and I misquoted when I said, I read the quote from Donald Trump. It was not what he said last night, but it's what he said in Pennsylvania back in October, talking about companies that don't need the money, most of them. He said they take the money, they got great lawyers, but they move anyway. You're not keeping jobs in this country. And so I don't think he took that approach. And I'm going to kind of read between the lines here. Like I said, he's not president yet. I don't think he has the power to do that, even if that's what he wants to do. And I hope he doesn't want to do it. But here's some hopeful quotes from him and some analysis even from the Washington Post. I don't think he's going to attack it that way. They say Trump threatens consequences for U.S. firms that relocate offshore. Now, they point out the president-elect said more companies will decide to stay in the United States because his administration will lower corporate taxes and reduce regulation. See, that's something that they're doing across the board for everyone. So that means if you want to start a business, you get to have the same level playing field that all these other people are. I don't like to see presidents who are picking the winners and losers like Obama has tried to do so much, because a loser like Obama is going to pick losers like he did with Solyndra. But even though you got Donald Trump, who would do a better job of picking which companies are going to, we're going to back to say here, that's not the job of president. The job of president is to get the chains off of us. And we're going to show you how Obama, in his last few days as president, is trying to put even more chains on us. But that looks like that is what Trump is going for. And as one of the people that they talked to at the Carrier place said, we knew that Trump was on it, said the woman. She said, he's not even in office yet, and he's saving jobs. Now, they say, of course, this is Washington Post, so consider the source. In fact, by Trump's own telling on Thursday, he has no plans to intervene in the Carrier case until he watched an evening news segment featuring a worker who expressed confidence that the president-elect would save the Indianapolis plant. Now, he did have intentions to do that. He had announced that. He was mocked by President Obama, saying, what, do you got a magic wand or whatever? I don't think he had any plans to intervene until he became president, perhaps. But when he saw that, I think it moved him on a personal level. I've seen a lot of reports, and I don't know Donald Trump personally. I've seen a lot of reports surface after all these negative things they put out about Donald Trump about all the charitable things that he did to help people. I think the guy really does have a heart. Look at the people who worked for him. Look at his butler who worked for him for decades and how loyal that guy is. So I think he really was moved by the plight of these people. And I think as he's watching this, I think he got onto it and tweeted out on Thanksgiving, hey, I'm on it. I'm working even on Thanksgiving to keep this here. Now let's take a look and contrast to the way that Obama did this. At this same plant, the same carrier plant, Obama gave them federal money from all of you who are listening, all you Americans who are listening. We have a global audience, but the Americans who are listening, $5.1 million in 2013 was given to this same company, to Carrier, to United Technologies. What was the purpose? The purpose was to create and maintain green jobs. See, they didn't want to necessarily keep these jobs in the U.S. And this is part of a $2.3 billion advanced manufacturing tax credit program known as the 48C program. It gives a 30% tax credit. See, the problem is Obama's focus was on promoting a globalist climate agenda, not on keeping American jobs, okay? He wanted to sacrifice this money, and he did, to his green idols. But at the same time, as he's ready to leave office, he's going to put a new EPA rule on us that will cost $1 trillion. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, your host. Joining us in this segment is Philippe Larouth. He is a journalist with 61 years' experience. He's currently the president of the International Federation of Journalists. Before that, for 9 years, he was vice president of the European Federation of Journalists from 2004 to 2013. And for 10 years, he was president of the Belgian Association of Professional Journalists from 1995 to 2005. The reason we're talking to him is because there is a worldwide push against freedom of the press going on right now. Full court press. We've had the European Parliament come out, pass legislation. 1 week ago, Wednesday, the Wednesday before Thanksgiving Day, they passed legislation to combat propaganda that they said was coming from Russia. Then, this week, we saw 1 week later, on Wednesday, we saw, as the Washington Post put it, an effort to combat foreign propaganda advances in Congress. Isn't that interesting? And they used the National Defense Authorization Act that they're going to put this in, calling on the State Department to lead government-wide efforts to identify propaganda. So they're going to tell us what propaganda is. We're not going to be allowed to decide that for ourselves. They're going to tell us, Facebook and others are going to tell us what real news is and what fake news is. And that is a very, very dangerous situation for them to define what is real information and what is not real information. But notice that this is being done now legislatively. And at the same time, we saw a Bloomberg article come out this week saying that Russia weaponized social media. So you didn't know that you were working for Russia when you started talking about Hillary Clinton's crimes as they were being exposed by WikiLeaks. So I think we have him on the line. Do we have Mr. Larouth on the line? Okay, we have Mr. Larouth on the line. Philippe Larouth of the International Federation of Journalists. President, thank you for joining us.
No problem. Good morning.
Good morning. Now, tell us what is going on the European side, because they are pushing against freedom of the press there. This is something we've seen the London Guardian saying they think it's a very dangerous precedent. We've seen Glenn Greenwald with The Intercept, and of course he was involved with Ed Snowden's leaks. He said this is nothing but a new form of McCarthyism. Tell us what is going on in Europe, because this is a worldwide push.
Yes, you know, there are tensions between European Union and Russia. And the European Parliament passed a resolution, but with very controversial, only 44% of the MPs voted in favor. There was a high number of abstentions. Fighting propaganda by Russia and Al-Qaeda, first reason to be surprised. Associating a state with Al-Qaeda, it doesn't seem fitting to us. But naming Russian media by name, accusing them of propaganda. And we found that it was not right to accuse them and not giving them a chance to defend themselves. That was one point. And the second point, we consider you shouldn't find propaganda with propaganda, but with ethical and responsible journalism.
Exactly. That's the thing that concerns everybody, is how you define it. We're going to have these gatekeepers who are going to tell us what real news is and what fake news is, what real news is and what propaganda is. How can we trust these people? In most cases, they work for the government itself. They're going to be the ones telling us that things are propaganda or fake. And we know that they're going to label the things that are critical of them from experience. We know that's going to be labeled as fake. It's going to be labeled as propaganda.
Yeah, you know, we used to say, where do you find fake information? On social media. And our fight is to distinguish between fake and honest information made of one thought, one other thought. And, you know, we have a sacred principle is in journalism is the fact is sacred, the comment is free. You may not like the comment, but the comment is free.
Yes, absolutely. And I think that's a very important thing. I mean, the history of our country, as it was being founded, we've had a very high literacy rate. It was much higher than it is now. We had papers that were highly partisan, highly opinionated, and they did battle in the public space. Always in the past, I have always believed that everybody has a bias. Just what you choose to report shows some of your bias. So I have always preferred to find highly opinionated journals on multiple sides of the same issue and form my own opinion. I think that's what a lot of people are doing with social media now, but they don't like to see this kind of open discussion, do they?
No, on the social media you have not the same kind of debate. A debate is I express my opinion, yours is different, and we debate. On the social media, what we witness is that mostly the people look for people thinking the same as they do. So this is us against them. And this is really what we are trying to avoid. Then we are resolutely in favor of debating. Not everyone has to think the same way, and it's very positive when you have an exchange of views.
Yes, and so the issue is to have more open discussion of views and not to have a gatekeeper who's going to do it. So I want to look at this legislation that is being proposed in both Europe and the United States to combat foreign propaganda. And again, they identify the Russians always as being behind this, even though they don't necessarily have any support for that. What are the specifics that have come out? I see this article here from RT saying that the European Parliament voted to pass a resolution to respond to information warfare by Russia. In a report written by Polish MP Anna Fotyga, Sputnik news agencies were singled out along with RT as being among the most dangerous tools of hostile propaganda. Do they have any specifics of how they're going to implement this? Are they going to create their own counter-propaganda news media, or are they going to try to suppress this? How are they going to try to control this and push back against it?
Yeah. First of all, this resolution of the European Parliament is not mandatory, so it's a resolution. But when they say Sputnik is a propaganda tool, we would ask them, show us when and what's Sputnik a propaganda tool. What information that Sputnik gave was a propaganda lie. And as long as they don't give us concrete examples, we suspect they are describing the media without demonstrating, proving this is a propaganda tool. We are not naive. We know the big states have propaganda instruments. That's not the point. But please, when you describe the media as a propaganda tool, explain why and show us examples.
I think that's the key thing. When you say that somebody is doing propaganda or they're doing fake news and they don't talk about a specific incident. And so a lot of times we will have people single out our organization, say, we disagree with what you had to say, and we'll have a back and forth talk about that. But when they do a broad labeling, saying this fake and propaganda and this outlet over here, they do nothing but fake news. So they attack RT or they attack INFOWARS. They say, you're nothing but fake news. Instead of saying specifics about that. Yeah, that's the key thing, isn't it?
How can you defend yourself when you have no concrete, real fact to expose? If you're telling me the International Federation of Journalists is a liar federation, how could I respond them? If you tell me this press release you issued, I don't agree with them, I can argue about this, and we can have an open discussion.
Exactly, and that's the key thing. Now, as we look at this in the United States, I don't know how you feel about this, because this is a worldwide. I've got an article here from Sydney talking about the U.S. election, characterizing it as malice and misinformation and fake news. Again, no specifics, always the generalities. But you know, when we look at what's happening here in the U.S., I'm very troubled by the fact they're putting this into the NDAA, where we've already seen them insert things like indefinite detention by the military without trial or accusation. That seems to be where they kind of put authoritarian movements or legislation in the United States, and they're funding this, and I don't know what they're going to spend money on, but they're going to spend $160 million over 2 years, so $80 million a year to combat some generalized fake news.
Yes, and the problem is they have financial means the media don't have in general.
Yes.
But it's really worrying, because well, we were told what to make the decision in the American election, that there were the social media. Second thing we heard, you know, in Europe, for instance, America is the West Coast and the East Coast, but the real Americans are between the coasts. And it seems the media have not the means anymore to send people and to go in the little towns listening to what the people have to tell. And it is real journalism. And unfortunately, this is less and less the case, and you have to react on the spot on news or fake news on Facebook or Instagram and so on. We think ethical journalism is more needed than ever.
Yes, yes. And I think what is interesting, I think the two things that people need to take away from this is, number one, the charges of fake and propaganda news are very generalized. They don't get specific about facts or about articles in most cases. So we see a broad-based attack, but then they get very specific about individual news organizations. So they attack Breitbart, or they attack INFOWARS, or they attack RT in various places. And we're seeing that here in America. So we're going to take a quick break, and when we come back, I want to ask you about your comments as we see a advertiser boycott being organized against Breitbart News, which was part of the anti-globalist movement here in the United States. And, of course, former head of Breitbart is now the chief, well, I see he's the chief strategist for Donald Trump and the Donald Trump administration. So there's been a lot of pushback against them specifically. Now they're trying to take them on a blacklist. We'll be right back with Philippe Larouth. Oh, okay. We're going to skip the break. Okay, so Alex wanted to jump in. And do we have Alex on the line? Or?
Yes, you do.
Okay, good. Thank you, Alex. Go ahead.
You bet. Just popping in here. I know I took off to take care of some business, and I appreciate you filling in, doing a great job. I wanted to interview this journalist because I appreciated himself and his organization, which is, you know, one of the most prestigious in Europe, exposing the fact that these blacklists are very, very dangerous. And this is what authoritarian regimes do, like communist China, is they come out and they say, oh, we're arresting all these people, or we're finding these people because we say this is fake news criticizing the Communist Party. The CIA in the 60s, and it's declassified in the 70s, created the term conspiracy theory to just discredit somebody and not address their info. That doesn't work anymore. So now they call you fake news. They call INFOWARS, Breitbart, and the Russians. That's the three groups. All we do is bring on original documents, common sense information, and lay it all out. And that's why they hate us. We're bigger than they are now. INFOWARS.com, according to Quantcast, and according to all the other major services, is bigger than the New York Times online. Our listenership is 40-plus million a week now, is the new bottom. The high is 85 million. Those are real numbers, okay? So that's what's happening. Donald Trump has those numbers. He knows that. They were delivered to him last week. So this is what's unfolding. They are crapping their britches because real citizen media, independent media, and also foreign media are now challenging ruthless Western corporate media that has become globalist, is destroying our national sovereignty. So my big issue for the guest is we need to organize, as you were just saying, like with Breitbart, against this, to have Kellogg's funding George Soros' color revolution, Black Lives Matter destabilization here, like he's done in Russia, like he's done in Ukraine, like he's done with the Arab Spring. And now Kellogg's comes along and says, oh, your online advertising, that, by the way, they had to buy into in a consortium through that ad agency. I know the ad agency. They bought the placement there to then be able to pull it and create this tsunami of getting hundreds of other companies to pull it. Good. Please pull yourselves. Give us a list of who not to shop with. I haven't eaten Kellogg's crap in over 20 years. It's the worst GMO garbage, as you said yesterday, David. Eating the box is better. So good. They want to boycott. They want an economic war. They want to censor us. This is blacklisting that makes McCarthy look like an angel. This is out of control garbage, and I'm sick and tired of it. And so I'm glad that major journalistic organizations, even Matt Taibbi of Rolling Stone got this right, said it's very dangerous. The London Guardian said it's very dangerous. This is the essence of tyranny. This is failing corporate media trying to shut down all of its competition with labeling, and they say here in the U.S., they want to have blacklists. They've already kicked us off Google areas. They've already kicked us off Google Chrome. They're already kicking us and Breitbart off apps. We're already under attack. The censorship's here, and we're so nice. We're just calmly sitting here taking it, and none of us are even getting mad like we should. I'm going to sign off. God bless you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Alex. Yeah, that's a good point because, as we pointed out many times, conspiracy theory was a weaponized term created by the CIA to shut down any discussion of the JFK assassination. They've used it against anyone that they want to shut down who is questioning official stories from the government. Now that term has morphed to fake news because it's just not getting any traction. And we're talking to Philippe Larouth. He is president of the International Federation of Journalists. He's been, as I pointed out, he's had 61 years as a journalist, and he has served 10 years with the European Federation of Journalists, 10 years as president of the Belgian Association of Journalists. The website is ifj.org. Mr. Larouth, when we look at what's happening here in the United States, I find this legislation that just got passed 2 days ago here to be very troubling. This $160 million that they're going to spend over 2 years is going to go to the State Department to lead a government-wide effort to identify propaganda and counter its effects. Your comments?
Yes, legislations, and nowadays, I mean, also security legislations have very dangerous aspects for press freedom because, intelligence are watching what is happening, and once again, they might quote some comments, describe them as anti-national or so. Even though it expresses an opinion. We are witnessing, for instance, in Turkey. There was an attempt coup in Turkey last July, and ever since, more than 2,500 journalists were dismissed. Hundreds of journalists were indicted, and all are accused of taking part to a terrorist organization. Yes. If you are a Kurd journalist and you defend maybe the Kurdistan independence, you are considered not a journalist expressing an opinion. You are considered a terrorist, and I really mean such legislations are very, very dangerous for free journalists.
And it's the hallmark of tyranny, isn't it? Every tyrannical regime will first move against free speech. They will physically arrest journalists. But even before that, and when we talk about the term conspiracy theorist that was created by the CIA, we all need to go back, and you guys can look this up on the internet. You can do your own research. Look up Operation Mockingbird. It was created by the CIA. What was the purpose of that? It was to identify and to control the media, to identify individuals and news organizations that they could control. And of course, in the past, in America, they had very tight control over the flow of information. They had just 3 major television stations. Yes, go ahead. I thought you were...
You are punching.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Mr. Larouth. Did you want to comment on that? Yes.
No, you are quite right. And I would just add a comment. As a journalist, I also say I have the right to make errors, and provided I correct them afterwards. But the legislation is used indeed to prevent journalists inquiring about maybe facts which could be very disturbing for the state, and not only in dictatorships, also unfortunately democratic states. You see more and more of those legislations, and what you describe in the United States is indeed very, very preoccupying.
Yes, I think we should all be very concerned when we see our government spending hundreds of millions of dollars to identify propaganda and to counter it. That's very, very amazing to see that in a country where we enshrined in the very first amendment to protect individual rights, we talked about freedom of the press, because it is essential. As you pointed out, in Turkey and other places, it's a hallmark of a dangerous, oppressive, authoritarian tyranny to take the press out first. And so this is where it begins, and we have to stop it before it begins. And I think it's interesting, Mr. LaRuth, as you're talking about this, we see this resolution that was passed in the European Parliament, but we see actual legislation and funding a week later in the United States for the same thing. And, of course, this is a worldwide response from governments trying to protect themselves, who have sold themselves out to the multinational global corporations, because as the people realize this isn't working out for them, and as we see press stories about that, they have to try to take over that dialogue, don't they?
You're quite right. This is a global phenomenon, and there's a reason why we have to build solidarity between journalists around the world to oppose this. And for instance, I find it very positive that you have now those conglomerates of investigative journalism, journalists revealing facts on world scale, which no single journalist or no journalist of one single country could inform about, and it might be a good answer to those efforts to silence free press.
Yes, this is something that is very dangerous, and we really need to understand the global aspect of it, because we really are in a situation where I think that, as we saw Trump say yesterday, he said most people's connections are at a local level, and they want to mix with each other at a local level. And I don't know if I'm getting feedback there on the audio if you're trying to say something, but we see that people want to organize on a local level. That doesn't mean that we're going to go to war with each other just because we want to have our own local cultures and that sort of thing. But that's what they're pushing against, because they see that as a threat to their global agenda. And the tools that they are now putting in place, these are being put in place by the same people who believe that they have a right to eavesdrop on all of your communications and to try to profile you as to your political beliefs. And now they're going to weaponize this, saying that they're going to push back against foreign influences and foreign propaganda. They will be the ones who will be defining it. Thank you so much, Mr. LaRuth, and we will be in contact with you, I hope. Keep us informed as to what's going on in Europe and the fight for the freedom of the press.
Certainly do. Thank you. Good morning.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us again. That's Philippe LaRuth, President of the International Federation of Journalists. That website is ifj.org. It's a worldwide fight.
March.
Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, your host today. In the last segment, we were talking to Philippe LaRuth, who's the president of the International Federation of Journalists. And, of course, he's got 61 years experience as a journalist. He's talking about how the government is saying in Europe, and now we see legislation here in the United States, where the government is going to decide what is true and what isn't. Well, in another way, and as Sheila Hemphill and Coleman Hemphill, who just came in here from another group, Texas Right to Know, we're going to talk about health information. And as she pointed out, we're just talking about the government defining what is true and what isn't. Well, the government wants to define what is medicine and what isn't, what is helpful to your health and what isn't. They want to make those decisions for you. You're not going to be allowed to determine what information is true. You're not going to be allowed to determine what you want to take for your own health if we don't keep these people in check. And I think it's very interesting when we look at Benjamin Rush, who was one of the founders of this country, one of the signers of the Declaration of Independence, and he said, if we don't put this into the Constitution, we will have a medical tyranny. Of course, that hasn't really stopped them from trying to stop the First Amendment, freedom of the press, the fact that it is in the Constitution. But he had this to say, and I want to read this before we go to our guests. He said, this is Benjamin Rush, signer of the Declaration of Independence. He said, unless we put medical freedom into the Constitution, the time will come when medicine will organize into an undercover dictatorship to restrict the art of healing to one class of men and deny equal privilege to others. This is a guy who understood what was going to happen. He was a physician. He knew what human nature was. See, that's the key thing. Human nature doesn't change. People always want to exert this power over others. So we're going to talk about how this is looking specifically in Texas. There is a rally coming up to push back against an overarching government agency here in Texas. You probably have the same thing developing to one degree or the other in your state. And, of course, we are all under the watchful eye of the FDA, when we talk about the co-op of the government, we talk about how the corporations take control of these bureaucracies are supposed to regulate them. We call that regulatory capture. Of course, that is always the issue. That's what Benjamin Rush was talking about. Human nature does not change. So joining us now in the studio is Sheila Hemphill, founding member of the Texas Right to Know, and Coleman Hemphill. So welcome. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for bringing this up to our attention. Your organization is Texas Right to Know. Tell us what is going on here in Texas that concerns you, and tell us why you are going to have this demonstration. What's coming up December 9th? 9th, yes.
Every 10 years, there is an agency known as the Sunset Commission that goes in and evaluates the performance of various different state agencies. So
to see if they should continue.
Exactly. And most people don't even have a clue how our legislation works. So you have your representative, that everyone has a representative and a senator that represents them. I encourage everyone to find out who your representative is and be in contact with them. They make the laws, and then they task an agency to make rules. So that's where we can get into a lot of problems. It's not even so much the law, but the rules established by, in this instance for medicine, is the Texas Medical Board. And
it's always that way. With the federal bureaucracy, we see that they had 80,000 pages published last year, and of course they set a new record this year. Those are laws. They call them rules, but they're really laws. And so we've gone from a situation where we had taxation without representation to a situation where we have legislation without representation. The legislature creates these organizations, and these organizations want to create empires of their own. And so they go out there, they've got their own, they write their own laws, they assess their own fines, and then in the federal level, they say, well, it's not necessarily an excessive fine because it's not criminal, it's civil. And the prohibitions against excessive fines just for criminal stuff, so they call civil asset forfeiture, or you got the EPA coming after somebody, fining them $80,000 a day, and they say, oh, that's fine. And then they've got their own court system and their own law enforcement of the laws that they create. And so we see this happening at the state level. Tell us what is happening specifically with the Texas Medical Board.
The Texas Medical Board is going to be having their sunset review on, the hearings are the 8th and 9th of December next week, with public testimony on Friday, December 9th, starting around 9 o'clock. And we're in room E1.030 of the Capitol. Just visit Texas Right to Know, and you will see the details of what this the hearings are, and the rally that we're going to be having on the south steps of the Capitol. We'll start assembling at 2. With a rally from 2:30 to 3:30, and this is an excellent opportunity for people to come and learn how to get involved, because what happens at that Capitol determines the laws that we have to live under.
That's right.
So this happens every 10 years as a sunset. So this is a very pinnacle time that we've got to get in here.
We look at the big picture, we look at what's going on in Washington, but you need to understand that a lot of this is happening to us at the local level. What are they specifically doing? I understand that they are coming after some non-licensed healthcare practitioners, people like chiropractors, naturopaths, and everything. But they're also, tell us about what they're proposing to do that is more stringent than what the FDA does in terms of supplements, for example.
Well, what we're seeing is when a complaint is filed against a physician, the physician doesn't have a right to know who even filed the complaint. It's a little better than it used to be. It used to, they accept anonymous ones that no one even knew who filed the complaint, but it triggered what is called an investigative review conference, which is very costly. Informal review. Well, it's anything but informal, because everyone has to lawyer up. So even if it's a trivial, one instance is in Chapter 164 of Physician Advertising Rules, that they are not to have anything that says false, misleading, or deceptive. Well, given that we're in an environment where the standard of care dictates all practices of the general population of physicians, in many instances, they don't even acknowledge the significance of nutrition in health.
Yeah, exactly. Of course they don't.
No.
The only thing that's significant is the pharmaceutical.
Exactly.
and when people do put out advertisements saying that nutrition or immunology or detoxification may be beneficial to your health, they are fined by the Texas Medical Board. So if we want access to nutrition and education about nutrition from physicians, if we want to learn about chelation and heavy metals and the impact that has on the body, detoxification from our physicians, we have to go to the Capitol and defend them. Because when they speak out and they put out information to inform people of how to get better, they're slapped down by these medical boards.
So that's just amazing. That is so unscientific to say that you're not going to have an open discussion of this, But we are going to determine, and we're going to tell you what is fake medical news and what isn't. I mean, that's where we're coming from, right? It always comes back to the gatekeepers who want to tell us not only what we can do, but what we can read, what we can think about, even our discussion they want to control.
But now we're talking about the health.
Yes.
There's nothing more that impacts an individual than the health of you or your loved one. It impacts your finances, it impacts your job, it impacts your future, it impacts your children.
Oh, absolutely.
And they're operating outside the Constitution and outside of due process. And so when they file a complaint against a physician and they don't know who is filing that complaint, that's a blatant violation of their Sixth Amendment right. Then they come into these offices without consent from the patient or the doctor, in violation of HIPAA law and the Fourth Amendment to privacy, taking people's medical records. And the environment that that's caused has put a chilling effect through the small community of integrative and complementary doctors, suppressing their right of free speech and their First Amendment rights to speak the truth.
Just like when we were talking to Philippe LaRuth in the previous segment, he said, the problem is that we need more information, right? We need to combat bad information with more information. People need access to this. They're concerned that too many people who are just they're going to get together in little cliques and they're going to share information that they already believe. But the solution to all of this, there's no perfect world. The solution to everything, even if you got somebody out there selling something that is quackery or fraud, the solution to that is to put out more information talking about attacking that
and it's
specifically.
Up to me to decide.
Exactly.
We're talking about a thought police environment.
Yes.
Which I find unacceptable.
And there's no more subtle tyranny that is so complete in taking away your civil liberties than our medical freedom. I mean, medical freedom and freedom for our doctors is the answer. And you're exactly right. More information on what's beneficial and what's not.
We had this ruling coming out of Fort Worth that says the U.S. judge easily determines patients have no reasonable expectation of privacy in their medical records. A private conversation between a patient and a doctor may be a thing of the past, and I don't think most people realize that. You go in there and you have this stack of disclosures of all this HIPAA. The Texas Medical Board say they are exempt from HIPAA.
Yeah.
Now, in this case in Fort Worth, they are coming into practices, presenting themselves as a Texas Medical Board. We want to see some patient records with two other people that never identified themselves, but turn out to be DEA agents.
Wow.
Okay.
Wow.
So they don't have the right to know who the complaint is from. In many instances, the complaints come from the insurance companies. And we just got back from a Texas Medical Board meeting, not at about 10:30. And in this were multiple testimonies of patients with Lyme disease.
Yes.
There are certain diseases that are almost like untouchables in Texas because of the standard of care that is established by these societies. Well, what Texas adheres to is from the Infectious Disease Society that says Lyme's hard to catch, easy to cure, all you need is a few weeks of antibiotics. Well, that's not true.
All right.
So when we are spending $2 billion leaving Texas to go get treatment, this father's son got a tick bite at a Boy Scout camp. They have spent over $250,000 seeking treatment because when it was even got the diagnosis in a Texas hospital, the head of the department walked out.
Wow.
And that's money leaving the state. So George Bush, when he was governor in Texas, said that over $2 billion around that time.
That's a lot of money.
$2 billion was leaving the state of Texas for people seeking care that they didn't have access to in the state.
Well, this connects us to so many different things. As we had David Simpson, who is a Texas representative.
Yes.
He pushed to allow medical marijuana to be used for certain instances, and he was successful in getting it there because he showed that it was the only treatment that was viable for people who had multiple uncontrollable seizures. And we know from many
intractable epilepsy.
Exactly, and we know from a lot of those are caused in terms of reactions to vaccines. We know from the vaccine court, quote unquote court, that quietly operates and gives people compensation for injuries to vaccines that supposedly nobody ever has an injury to vaccines. But as he was pointing out, you're talking about money leaving the state. He had a couple of families that he talked about, and he said, look, they tried all the pharmaceuticals, they tried everything that the conventional medicine would allow, and so they went to Colorado, one family, and it saved their kid. The other family couldn't afford to just leave their home and their job and go live in California to do that, so they brought this in illegally, and they brought it in at risk to their own freedom, going to jail so that they could help their child who had this life-threatening disease. It could kill them, but it completely destroyed their quality of life.
That law you're referring to is referred to as a compassionate use bill. And it has parameters that you have to have failed 2 pharmaceuticals and have 2. I'm like, is that really the legislator's responsibility to dictate how medicine is done, or just to make things legal and then
what's your responsibility to make sure the pharmaceutical companies are taken care of first? So that's why you try all the pharmaceutical drugs, and if they don't kill you, and if you don't die from the disease that you're supposed to treat, then you can try something else perhaps.
What's disturbing is when we look at the statistics from 2007 to 2013, the number of complaints have actually gone down. But the number of informal settlement conferences where everyone has to lawyer up and go down there and have their discussion to look at why a clause on your website or a flyer was deemed false, misleading, or deceptive. And then when a representative intervened for this physician asking, tell me what is false, misleading, or deceptive, the response was, we don't get that specific. So that's unacceptable. And I think
we know what's false when we see it, but we can't define it.
We have to have some parameters in the rules.
Yeah.
And we know that we need to have good relationships with the Texas Medical Board, with our legislators, but they need to hear from us. And we need to have people show up on December 9th, start showing at 2, and we're going to have a rally from 2:30 to 3:30. And I encourage people to visit our website, Texas Right to Know, and click on Medical Freedom. And from that website, you can be watching the activity. We have a bus coming from Dallas and Fort Worth. And if we get enough input from the InfoWarrior audience, we'll get buses, and we would love to bus you in from north, south, east, and west.
Well, that's a key thing. You know, people need to understand when they look at things like mandatory vaccines and all these other issues that are forced upon us. I mean, this is how all this stuff comes in. And we talk about the fact that they won't get into the specifics for a particular doctor that they're coming after, but they're just, that's what we're seeing in the news media. As Philippe LaRuth was saying, they won't talk about specifics of a story. They will just come after a particular news organization. So they don't talk about necessarily specifics of a treatment or this type of approach or a supplement. They will come after people who have a different philosophy or people who are from a different industry that are in competition with the industries that control these regulators. That's why this needs to have a sunset. It needs to go away, doesn't it?
Well, and we want this to be a precedent for all the legislation that's coming up in this upcoming session. Because they will have, I believe last session they had 18 different bills related to vaccines just in the state of Texas.
Yes.
And so
there's a massive push on that. It was just a couple of years ago that the pharmaceutical company said, we're going to stop doing any antibiotic research. And we're just going to focus completely on vaccines. And boy, have they.
Yeah.
I mean, just upping the number that you have to do. And when we look at what's happening in California, we do not want that to happen in Texas or other states. And the way you do that is to get involved at the state level, because they're going to try to take this to the federal level. Believe me, they're going to try to do it there, but we can fight this at the state level.
You know, Donald Trump talked about America not winning anymore. We don't cure anymore. We're 49th in the world in medical outcomes and life expectancy. So when people get a diagnosis, they're destined for a life of constantly being treated. We don't cure people anymore. We have the 30th in the world for infant mortality rate. 1 in 2 people now will have cancer in their lifetime. 1 in 4 have diabetes. And there's been an exponential increase in almost all of your neurological diseases really over the last 15 to 20 years. So the environment and the standard of care has failed. And what do we do for all of those patients that aren't serviced by the standard of care?
Get this one. Here was a doctor who was treating chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia that I'm sure many of your audience know people who suffer from a very painful diagnosis of unknown origin in many times. He got a complaint. The patient assumed he was distributing too many supplements or pills or something. They came in, it wasn't a problem with the supplements or the medication, but they found that he was giving a lidocaine drip that was non-narcotic and would enable people to have pain relief for 4 to 6 weeks. Okay, here's a big problem, is that these complementary and integrative doctors who are practicing under Title 22, Part 9, Chapter 200 of the Texas Administrative Code, which is standards for physicians practicing complementary and alternative medicine. We have the law. When they came in, there wasn't a problem with the pills, but when they found this lidocaine drip, a pulmonologist, a lung doctor said, lidocaine? What do you mean you're doing the lidocaine drip? You can't do that. And the doctor goes, well, okay, I'll stop. but I'm one of 15 networks around the nation that routinely give this for fibromyalgia and chronic fatigue.
There needs to be more information.
Oh.
We need to have a marketplace, and hopefully we're going to see something like that happen.
The standard of care he got cited for not following for chronic fatigue and fibromyalgia was graded exercise and psychiatric evaluation.
Wow. Stay with us. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and I'm here with Sheila Hemphill and Coleman Hemphill. They are founding members of the Texas Right to Know. It's a coalition to give you information about your health. You know, you have a right to know about your health, just as you have a right to know about politics. And that's what we've been talking about this entire hour. We started out talking to Philippe Larouth, who is president of a European organization, International Federation of Journalists. I think it's more than Europe, but he has worked for 61 years there. And he says they're trying to shut down and define for us what we can say, labeling things as fake. And the same thing is being done with your health information. You know, I was just looking at this article from the Daily Mail, and they said Parkinson's could start in the gut, not in the brain. And so they've done a study here with mice, and they saw that if they have gut health problems, how many times have we seen this? We've seen Dr. Group come on again and again talking about the importance of gut health. Now we're finally seeing them do some studies. They just completely ignore the issues of nutrition, the issues of probiotics for the longest time, and now they can't ignore that anymore. So we've had naturopaths that are doing that, but they're the types of people who are being targeted now in the state of Texas. And it's one of the reasons why we sell the products that we do. I'll just do a quick plug here for Biome Defense, because we're going to talk about probiotics that are going to get your gut healthy. Maybe you didn't realize that might even a healthy gut is going to make a difference in Parkinson's. They say, of course, you do have genetic issues, but there's also these epigenetic issues that are there that are focused on your nutrition. Also, Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix is back at InfoWarsLife.com. That's our affordable, great-tasting Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix. It's back at InfoWarsLife.com. It gives you a full month's supply of essential vitamins, minerals, and amino acids. So nutrition is a very important part of your health. Do that before you resort to very dangerous, very expensive pharmaceutical drugs, and it's the government that is working with the pharmaceutical industry to make sure that you don't do this and trying to shut this down. And that's exactly what we're talking to the Hemphills from the Texas Right to Know about. They want to get a sunset law on this organization here in Texas, the Texas Medical Board. One of the things you were telling me during the break was the lack of qualifications that are required for people sitting on the Texas Medical Board as they sit in judgment of other people's medical advice and shutting down the free flow of information about nutrition as well as the effects of drugs.
They don't have any integrative and complementary training. They don't have any training or understanding of chiropractors that they're trying to take over that licenseship. So just like the mainstream media that constantly is going after, they paint a completely different narrative. They subscribe to their own schools of thought. They have no understanding, and so they prosecute very quickly many of these doctors.
Mm-hmm. And yet, in the rules, it specifically says that Rule 200.3 from the Chapter 200, a licensed physician shall not be found guilty of unprofessional conduct or be found to committing professional failure to practice medicine in an acceptable manner solely on the basis of employing a healthcare method of complementary alternative medicine. So when they
saying it's not about the method, but it really is about the method as we see it being enforced.
Because they're being evaluated by the standard of care, not the standards outlined in Chapter 200. Now, everyone needs to really pay attention to what's happening with the chiropractors. The Texas Medical Association, not the board, but a professional association, TMA, is suing, and it's in appeal right now, to prevent chiropractors the ability to do a diagnosis.
Wow.
So if you can't do a diagnosis, you can't bill insurance, because you have to have a diagnosis to be able to bill insurance.
That's amazing. That's amazing. And of course, I know chiropractic very well. My brother-in-law is a chiropractor. He, when he was in college in Iowa, he said, we love to have the people who come to us who have had all these things they've tried with medical issues and they failed, and they come to us last and we fix it. So thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
And again, that's the Texas Right to Know. You have a right to know. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, your host. We're going to be talking to Lionel coming up in the next segment. It'll be interesting to get his take on these events that have been taking place since the election. Last time we talked to Lionel, I think, was the night of the election, and he and I were talking about how interesting the Trump campaign was and how things just didn't work to attack him because everybody understood that he was authentic. So whether you agreed with him or not, whether he had rough edges or not, you realize that he was authentic on this. And I think it's going to be interesting. We certainly have seen him do his own thing even after becoming elected president. We've never seen a president go out and do a victory tour thanking the people that elected him because he went over the heads of the establishment, both press and political, and also to be proactive, to go out and to save jobs. As we point out, for 8 years, Obama hasn't saved a single factory. Instead, what he has done is misallocate taxpayer money in a kind of crony capitalism way. And as I pointed out earlier in the show, this issue with EPA rules and regulations, and understand that even though he's already surpassed the record number of new regulations by a bureaucracy, that's legislation without representation, folks, even though he's already accomplished that, he's already in the Guinness Book of Records as regulator-in-chief, he's not done yet. And he's pushing for a lot more regulations before the end of the year. Just the top 100 of those will be about $2 billion in additional regulation. But look at this new EPA rule. It's going to push regulatory costs past $1 trillion over a 10-year period. Isn't that amazing? $1 trillion of regulations, chains that he is putting on this economy. That's what Obama has done through his entire regime. They say a new implementation of EPA rules, this is from the Washington Examiner, on heavy trucks has boosted the 10-year regulatory burden on America past $1 trillion, 75% of which have been imposed by the Obama administration. If this can go through, okay, this is a one-time charge of $3,000 per person, or if you take it at a rate of an annual rate, that's $540 per man, woman, and child. Think about that when you look at some of the libertarian organizations criticizing what happened with the Indiana government. And of course, it's not the federal government, didn't give any subsidies to Carrier. They say, well, Indiana shouldn't have given $700 per person per job there. Now, that is not $700 coming from each citizen of Indiana. That is $700 that is going to Carrier for those people's positions, except that Carrier is coming in with 2.5 times that amount to invest. And those people whose jobs they're paying $700 per job to keep, those people are going to pay far more than that in tax. They're going to have a massive impact on the economy there. And yet we've got Obama, $500 per man, woman, and child across the United States just for this one EPA regulation. It's just absolutely amazing what they're doing. And as we've talked in this last hour, we talked to Philippe Larouth from the European journalist that is talking about the push in Europe to shut down what they call fake news or propaganda. And of course, they're going to determine what is fake, what is propaganda. And they're saying this is coming from the Russians. We've got to be careful. They're going to ruin our elections in Germany just like they did in America. No, there's no evidence of that. There's no evidence they were behind the hack at the DNC. And they don't talk about the specifics. But let's talk about all this red baiting, all this red scare stuff. We got an article here from the New York Times. A subdued Vladimir Putin calls for mutually beneficial ties with the U.S. They used to call that détente. They used to call that a good thing until we had Obama and Hillary say we're going to have a Russian reset. And what they did was reset the Cold War. He said that he wanted to normalize and begin to develop bilateral relations on an equal and mutually beneficial basis with the United States. And the New York Times says that Putin's comments largely reprised the message he gave Mr. Trump in a telephone call soon after the election when both men agreed that something needed to be done to improve, quote, the absolutely unsatisfactory state of bilateral relations that had been created by Obama and Hillary Clinton. Let's just put that footnote in there for the New York Times since they won't tell you that. They say in a departure from his speeches in recent years, Mr. Putin avoided sarcastic or downright angry comments about the United States, but he also made it clear that Russia demanded to be treated with respect as a global power, not as a regional power that Mr. Obama described it in 2004, which infuriated Moscow. See, even the rhetoric was inflammatory that they've done. Now, stay with us. We're going to be right back. We're going to talk to Lionel. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, your host, and joining us now is an Emmy award-winning TV, as he puts it, news decoder and legal analyst, Lionel. He's a licensed trial lawyer and a former prosecutor. You can find him on LionelMedia.com as well as on Twitter at LionelMedia is his Twitter handle. And I see him clapping there on the monitor to the music and enjoying the music there. I want to talk to Lionel, about what has happened after the election. Of course, we've got a lot of interesting things in the last hour. I don't know if you heard the broadcast, Lionel, but I was talking to the president of European Journalists Association. He's got 61 years of journalism there. He's very concerned about the global push against free speech. You know, we heard Donald Trump say yesterday that there's no global flag, no global currency, no global citizenship, but there is a global pushback against freedom of the press. So I want to get your comments on that. Thank you for joining us, Lionel.
Oh gosh, I haven't spoken with you since the miracle.
That's right.
For lack of a better word. By
Since
the way,
the U.S. changed.
I want to tell you something. The music on this show is tremendous. Gypsy Kings. My theme song for years is Nina Morena. So this is from Mosaic. So tell your crew, you'll know why that particular song is my favorite. But look, you know, David, I don't even know where to start with this. And let's just, if I could, just start from something that makes me so thrilled. Donald Trump has acted as the potentiator to a form of psychosis and insanity that was always possible. But just like alcohol potentiates the effects of some drugs and heightens it, Donald Trump has made the world insane. Every aspect, and the mainstream media do not know what to do. Let me just stop for 1 second. What you and Alex and Paul and Leanne and Joe Biggs, I mean, what everybody did was so monumental. What Roger Stone did, it's not even, not that you're the guerrilla force behind it. You replaced the mainstream media. You're now mainstream. They're fringe. And they don't know what to do.
Oh, I think they do. They're trying to push back and saying, you guys are fake, and we're going to define what is real and what isn't. I mean, it's amazing. They're going to spend $160 million over 2 years to have the State Department determine what is propaganda and what isn't. I mean, this is taking fake news to an amazing authoritarian level. The attack against the people, as you point out, who worked with Donald Trump, who educated the public about what globalism was about, and who are a part of this victory. They want to shut that down. They want to shut down that information.
Well, this is great. Now, first, I don't even know where to start. Fake news. Okay, when they didn't like one particular story that was being advanced, when I say they, I think we know who they are. They are either the ruling class or the whoever. They called it a conspiracy theory. Okay, that wore thin because those things kept turning out to be true.
Yeah.
Those conspiracy theories never were fake conspiracy theories. They just said conspiracy theory without specifying false ones versus true ones. So they said, we need something new, some Orwellian, dystopian, vocabulary, some argot, what can we use? Fake news. Rather base, but rather clear. Now, if you look at one of the things which I found, and I don't want to go into this, but just to give you an idea, when Pizzagate came up, and again, I don't want to go into that, but I just want to give you an idea of how the BBC came up with a story that said, this is nonsense. Okay, so I guess they give it the F for fake news. This is fake. Now, I wanted to respond with yes, but you were the one who covered up pedophilia from Jimmy Savile. So I'm going to double back at you. So now you're fake. Okay, let's stop that. Let's use this one. Propaganda.
Yeah.
The Vatican, the Pope Gregory, whatever, from propaganda, the propagation of the truth. Okay, fine. Propaganda means something that is not true, because if propaganda is the truth, we don't call it propaganda. We say, well, it's the truth. Okay, propaganda means kind of an unwarranted, unspecified, unvalidated form of hyper, support of a particular idea or theory, which is nice, but we just went through an entire election of propaganda. So I don't want to be crude, but the size of these appendages that they have are elephantine. Okay, now, so they don't know what to do. So then they turn around and they say, well, let's scrap that. let's do this. Let's create a word, create a vector, and then jump on it. Whoever it is, raise your hand. Okay, Washington Post, start off. Trump is a racist. Nah, we can't do that. Why? Well, we've been using that. We've habituated people to that one. Somebody else, New York Times, HuffPost, how about white supremacist? Ooh, I like that. That's got some style to it. Anybody in particular? Steve Bannon. Oh, Bannon. And he's an anti-Semite.
Lionel, did you see what CNN did to Alex Jones, putting his face up on the screen and then putting underneath it, former KKK leader, and then underneath that lower two-thirds, put Alex Jones, INFOWARS? I mean, they labeled him, literally labeled him on the screen as a former KKK leader.
Now, New York Times against Sullivan notwithstanding, and it will be tough. And I know Alex, my God, if this guy sued everybody, he would have a separate division of, he need a law firm just to go after. But
you could go back into practice, yeah.
Oh, well, I still practice now, but that's okay. Yeah. I would need a factory to handle just the paperwork.
Yeah.
But do you understand the absolute, first of all, the genius of that? Because Alex and Drudge and others, you know, just when people try to say, oh, these fringe platform people, they don't know what they're conspiracy, they're crazy. You're exploding. So what happens is you're seeing this recalculated, and what's happening is simply this. What Bannon and others know is that when you are at war, and you know the old expression, if you can only tell you're over the target when you catch flak. But when your enemy is firing in the wrong direction and aiming at the wrong part, the wrong area, don't correct him. Let him use their ammo up. So if I were Bannon and Trump and everybody else and Kellyanne Conway and you name it, and Alex, let them keep these sorties, these fusillades up, because it's going to habituate people to it. It's going to waste their time while you proceed forward. And what this is there is a subdirectory of this, and that is the informational, the sense of what is reality. You know, in medical school, somebody said one time, a friend of mine who's a doctor said the question they asked was, how do you know what you know? How do you know this? So
it sounds like Rumsfeld.
Yes, right. The knowns and unknowns, and the and democracy's messy, and you go to war with the army you have, and oh, those buttes, we laughed at those, didn't we? You know, people dying. So what we're having right now is, David, only a man of your Brobdingnagian intellect can understand this. This is just incredible how complicated a plain old election was. The man hasn't even been sworn in. And what does he do? He has the carrier company stay. This is almost like a Logan Act violation. How does he even negotiate? He's a private citizen. Meanwhile, you've got Obama in these videos who, when Obama doesn't know what to do, two things happen. He stutters profusely, and as a stutterer, I myself can understand that. But also, he becomes very Southern. And he says, now what am I supposed to do? See? He becomes Jerry Clower all of a sudden. Now, what am I? Who in the hell can go and tell Carrier or anybody else? Who am I? Well, he did this, and the man doesn't even have any jurisdiction. So we go back to, Media Central. What do we do, guys? Call it a sellout. A sellout? Yeah, that Trump made concessions. This private citizen made concessions. Okay, fine. Kept them here, saved 1,000 jobs, saved I don't know how much money in lost wages, unemployment. So somehow they're trying to spin that. And it took Ronald Reagan 8 weeks to pick, I think, the person in charge of the transition. There's been nobody who has worked this fast. He hasn't even taken a vacation.
Yeah, it's amazing, the energy that he has. And now he's doing tours again. That's the amazing thing. Yeah, they can't keep up with his energy, and they're not going to give him a honeymoon. That's for sure. I had Gerald Celente on yesterday. He said, look at all the glowing covers for Obama when he was president-elect, and then look at the immediate attacks on Donald Trump. It's absolutely amazing to look at the contrast between the two.
A couple of things here. If you're a big Godfather fan, when he was at Jean-Georges here at Columbus Circle with Mitt Romney and Reince Priebus, you see old Mitten's face? That look of
Yeah, that picture that's going around Twitter, the social media, that's really funny.
Like Sollozzo and McCluskey when Michael came back from the men's room, when that moment of, oh no, I'm going to get it in Louis' Clam House here. So that was this amazing moment. Then we even watched today, one of the best things, they have the elevator cam at Trump Tower.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Today, the naked cowboy showed up, and I've been tweeting that Trump picked him as the new Fed chairman. Let's see if it picks up a detraction. Look, it could happen. Now, how about this? How about Mad Dog Mattis?
Yeah, that's right. We got a new patent. That's an article that I think we've got up. But he does look like George Patton, doesn't he? And he's got some interesting quotes like George Patton. We're going to be right back and take a quick commercial break. We're talking to Lionel. Lionel Media is his Twitter handle. We'll be right back with Lionel. Thank you. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight. We're talking to Lionel. I was thinking during the break about the stories we've seen the last couple of days, how they're talking about social media being weaponized by the Russians in this election. And I was thinking, really the way they're weaponizing social media, it's interesting, isn't it, how they accuse us of things, and it's the things that they're doing, projecting onto us. I mean, the people who are weaponizing social media, the people trying to shut down Breitbart. They're trying to organize a boycott of Breitbart by corporations. And so Breitbart pushed back. But, of course, what we've learned the last couple of days is this organization, Kellogg's, that has GMO corn, sugar, palm oil made by child labor. These people who've given $1 million to support Black Lives Matter, Soros organizations like that, they're trying to censor Breitbart. And at the same time, we see the State Department now. We had this vote pass on Wednesday, $160 million over 2 years for the State Department to decide what is true and what isn't. We try to fight that here at InfoWars by funding ourselves independently. We try to give you things that aren't made out of GMO corn, sugar, and palm oil. Things that aren't like Kellogg's sugar. We try to give you stuff that is healthy. And then there's this article. I'm sitting here looking at this article I talked about in the last hour briefly. The Parkinson's could start in the gut. This is a new study from the journal Cell that says that could overhaul medical research and the treatment of Parkinson's. They say scientists have found the first ever conclusive link between gut microbes and the development of Parkinson's-like movement disorders in mice. It suggests that probiotic or prebiotic therapies have the potential to alleviate the symptoms of the second most common neurodegenerative disease in the United States. So just think about that. Your right to know about your medical treatment, your right to know the truth about politics, to have an open discussion of these things. These people want to shut this stuff down. We fund our operation by giving you high-quality products that will help your health. And we want to try to keep that information free, both political and medical. So think about that and take a look at our products that help your gut. Things like Biome Defense, a probiotic. Of course, things like Living Defense and Liver Cleanse and all these different products that are focused on gut health. We've been telling you for a long time, as Dr. Group has, that's something you really need to focus on. It's a vital part of your nutrition. Just like you want to exercise, you want to have good nutrition, and you need to pay attention, though, to your gut health. And we have a whole slew of products at InfoWarsLife.com that focus on that. Biome Defense is a key one because it provides probiotics, but we also have Vitamin Mineral Fusion Drink Mix back in stock at InfoWarsLife.com. It gives you the essential vitamins, minerals, and amino acids your body needs. It has things like vitamin C, vitamin E, zinc, magnesium, selenium, L-glutamine, folic acid, calcium, many other things. It's all there and easy to take, great tasting. You get a full month supply in each one of these containers. You can find it at InfoWarsLife.com, a great way to make sure that you're proactive about your health. And then there are specific things that can directly address your gut health as well as your general nutrition level. That's the way we fund this operation. We appreciate your support, and that is what keeps us independent. So we aren't dependent on these multinational corporations that are now trying to shut down freedom of speech. Let's go back to Lionel. Lionel, we were just talking about the media pushback and trying to make it a bad thing that Donald Trump saved jobs and he's not even president.
Right.
Yeah, isn't that amazing?
You said something just now which made me think of something. What if I told you that you would one day be reading a story, David, in which there would be something in the United States called the Ministry of Truth?
Yeah.
Or because what you just said, the kind of a weird dystopian, Orwellian, the Ministry of Truth.
Yes.
Now,
That's precisely what they're creating, isn't it, Lionel?
That is precisely
within the State Department and within the NDAA. Isn't that interesting?
Right.
We've seen that before for indefinite detention by the military without trial.
And there doesn't seem to be any kind of alarm system in the part of a lot of Americans, any kind of antibodies to this that arise where people say, whoa, wait a minute. You know, what Donald Trump, the first thing, you know, when Donald Trump came along, look, I'd be less than honest with you if I told you that I thought, oh, sure, I knew he'd make it. Yeah, right. Against the Republican machine, Donald Trump? Sure. But what the hell? First thing he did one time was, it got my attention, was he brought up, in essence, the president's provenance, the birth certificate, the birther issue, which, of course, was brought to you by Hillary Clinton and Mark Penn. And
they were the first ones to put it out there, yeah.
It was their memo. Wait a minute. And whether you want to go do that again, it doesn't matter. I thought, whoa, wow. This guy's daring. I like this. I don't care whether he's actually saying something that veers from. And then he talked about vaccines. I thought, I love this. If we can get him to talk about aerosolized nanoparticulates and chemtrails and geoengineering, if we can maybe have him have a permanent subcommittee to reopen 9/11 and that con called The Official Story. I mean, who believes this? I mean, seriously, I don't know anybody.
Hang on, we'll talk more about that when we come back from the break, because we have that clip. I don't know if you've seen it, Lionel, where he talked the day of 9/11. We'll be right back. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and we're talking to Lionel. Just before we went to the break, we were talking about how they're pushing back against Donald Trump. They're pushing it back against the media that they believe helped to get the truth out there about globalism. And so they're trying to shut us down. And as Lionel pointed out, it sounds a lot like the Ministry of Truth. That's what they're funding with $160 million. They want the State Department to identify and push back against propaganda. That is, quite frankly, folks, Orwellian by any definition of the word. And I think, Lionel, when we look at this, we also see them pushing back against what Donald Trump did with the carrier program. And I don't think people are making the connection that Barack Obama already gave Carrier $5 million of federal taxpayer money as part of the green program to preserve a green agenda. It didn't keep their jobs here, though. So it's a very different thing. So here he is just talking to them and saying, hey, I think it's going to be in your best interest to stay here. I think the little bit of money that they got was from Indiana, and that money is going to stay there and be multiplied by Carrier's contribution and by the money that is spent by the individuals there. It amounts to $700 per job per year. So those people are going to pay way more than that in taxes staying in Indiana with their jobs. But people are completely ignoring, as they criticize Donald Trump for this, saying, well, we don't want to give people stimulus. He's not necessarily done that. He's just said, we're going to have a regulatory situation here that's going to be to the advantage of companies to do business here in America, to keep their factories here in America. But Obama created a failed program. He had subsidies to Solyndra, but he had a failed program, $2.3 billion. They put in a 48C program, and that was some of the money that went to Carrier, and it had no effect to keep those jobs here.
But let's just stop for just a moment. Here is a guy who, and I can't believe I'm using this term because I hated this during the election, but the optics of this. The optics. Here's an American who said, okay, I voted for you, Donald Trump. You said you were going to look out for me. And by the way, what he just said, David, about globalism, see, this is Alex Jones' ease. This is the language of INFOWARS. This is what you've been talking about. Because I've asked people before, and they've told me, what the hell's wrong with globalism? I said, no, we're not talking about we are the world, and I like to teach the world. They say, no, kumbaya. We're not talking about that. We're talking about a unipolar, basically a dissolution of jurisdiction, and then one massive new world. All right, fine.
But look at the way that he put it, Lionel. He talked about the sovereignty issues, and he said a global flag, a global currency, a global citizenship. That's what we always say, sovereignty. But the genius of Donald Trump is that he puts it in those terms that everybody can understand. Hey, you're talking about the flag, the money, and the citizenship, and that's what we're talking about when we say sovereignty. But he unpacked it.
And did he, David? Did he make an appointment to Bilderberg? I don't think I saw him.
That's right.
He might be the owner. Maybe he did. I don't know.
I don't think he's been there. Yeah.
I would have loved to have heard that one. It's like, hey, that's what I say to you guys. But So here's what happened. So he came along and he said, I'm going to do things my way. Barack Obama was this nobody, nondescript little community organizer, make him a state senator, fast track him to U.S. senator, and now he's like, just hand him the legislation, hand it to him, whatever it is. He went to war, drones, this, globalism, war, I mean, just name it, and he just did it, and he said, I'm a good soldier, and he's moving on. Okay, he's just moving on, but created such a feeling in so many people like, isn't he a good-looking guy? Isn't he a nice man? No, he's not a nice man. So here comes Trump, and he says, I am a billionaire. You can't buy me. I'm going to pick Wilbur Ross. I'm going to pick people who actually are in their 70s. They've made everything you could possibly do. They want to leave a legacy, and they're going to find something wrong with it. So anyway, so here's what I wish he would do next. Reopen that horrible 9/11 committee, which everybody knows is just a joke. I mean, what do we have to fear? I mean, just the truth. Just tell us what happened. And if ever there was anybody who would take on these issues, which mean so much to us. In fact, you were alluding to this before. This video that propped up and got for YouTube of basically Donald Trump evaluating the official story of 9/11 and applying his own particular knowledge of architecture and structural engineering and saying, this story, as we say in the South, that dog don't hunt.
That's right. That's right. Absolutely.
But he came along, and while Hillary Clinton, who basically her campaign was this, it's mine. I'm entitled to it. Give me the damn presidency. I don't want to. I'm not going to go to Youngstown. I'm not going to do shots.
Right. She was entitled. It was a sense of entitlement. It was a sense of privilege. It was amazing. And, Lionel, when we look at this, I've got a special report from Alex Jones and some critical information I'm going to cut to, and we'll come back to this. But they spent the longest time, the people who had the 9/11 Commission said, we want these pages, these 28 pages about the Saudis to go out, and they couldn't get anything done. The people who ran the commission couldn't get it declassified until Donald Trump came out and started talking about it, say, hey, where are those pages? And then what happened? That not only went out, but then they got the bill passed for compensation for the victims that's been held up by 15 years. And now what do we see? We see Lindsey Graham and John McCain saying, whoa, wait a minute, trying to eviscerate that by putting in, they really didn't know anything that was happening. The same type of excuse we saw Comey do for Hillary. I want to talk to you more about this 9/11 thing and where we could go with that. But first, we got a critical report from Alex Jones. Let's go to that report right now.
I am asking listeners and viewers who are tuning into us, not just here in the United States, but all over the world, to please listen to me very, very carefully. I know we cover a lot of incredibly important information here, but what I'm about to hit is paramount. Now, some of this you would have heard before from me, but most of it is brand new. Now, it is not prophecy that we're being proven right, that worldwide, from communist China to the EU to the United States, globalists, corporations, and their operatives in government are openly calling for censoring the people of the planet that criticize globalism, unelected corporate rule. We are having devastating victories all over the planet, and they are scared. They admit in their own publications, and again, they're so arrogant they think you're stupid. They think we're stupid. They think we don't even read these, where they admit planetary government, dumbing us down, controlling us. The WikiLeaks say keep us desperate, keep us in the dark, keep us poor. I mean, we know, okay, guys? We know how evil you are. We understand your ideology. We understand you can't compete with Americanism. But we now know their attack plan 3 weeks after Trump's devastating victory, where he won with such a massive landslide that they were unable to steal it, folks. He probably won by 65% of the vote. I'm serious. I mean, that's what internal polls were showing, was him 15, 20 points ahead. She had crowds of 300. He had crowds of 30,000 on average. It's incredible. She stole 5 states. That's been confirmed. Millions of illegals voting, millions of dead people, 20-something million dead people on the rolls. I mean, this is over the top. We have the Democratic operatives all caught admitting election fraud and how they were already doing it. And then Anderson Cooper gets up on CNN and says, no evidence 3 times in a row. I mean, what a joke, buddy. People hate you. They wouldn't believe anything you told them. If you walked out at high noon and said the sun was frickin' yellow, they wouldn't believe it coming out of your little snot nose. So sick of you blue blood bastards. Excuse me. Now, we are looking at the enemy plan now. And I go back to Matt Drudge now over a year ago, giving us the exclusive interview, just coming out of nowhere because he met with the Supreme Court Justice and others. I'm not at liberty to give you all the details, but I made phone calls and confirmed it with other people, not that meeting, but others like it, that everybody was told it's over in 2016. We're bringing in a dictatorship. We're getting rid of the Republican Party. You better give up. There's nothing you can do. We're getting rid of free speech. We're going to start arresting people we don't agree with. We're going to take the frickin' guns. Your kids belong to the state. Most of this you saw in the news. But the intelligence agencies, who aren't perfect, they do the hanging, though. They sat there and said, it's all true. You're going to end freedom in Europe and the United States. The communist Chinese are going to oversee censorship of the web, which is now in the news. Drudge learned this a year ago. I learned of this a year ago, that they were going forward with it. The intelligence agencies leaked the hell out of the truth. Patriots like you, every race, color, and creed, spread the word. Absolutely, foreign governments and others, from Iceland to Greece to Russia, are fighting the same globalists, so they joined us. But it wasn't propaganda, it wasn't lies, it was humanity organized independently as organic human intelligence resisting the technocracy of these inbred, out-of-control globalists. So history is happening. So now, 3 weeks and a couple days into the giant Trump victory, as he moves forward with Americanism, not globalism, a two-way fair street, not a win-lose system, they are now striking. As David and I reported earlier, the House has passed, it's going to the Senate, $170 million to open a new domestic press control Operation Mockingbird Part 2 system to, quote, identify fake news and have it banned. If you think Google's starting to ban us off Chrome and Breitbart's getting delisted and all this is happening off a few fake lists put out by anonymous groups that Google picked up, wait till the State Department issues one. Now, I've got a counter plan against this, but we knew it was coming. Now, if you add all this on top of each other, they've got Kellogg's coming out saying that they're going to pull their web sponsorship from anybody out there. Big frickin' deal. Now they're going to have a, quote, coalition. Good. List the hundreds of groups that we already know are funding radical jihadi groups and Black Lives Matter groups and other Ford Foundation destabilization groups. Show us the corporations that are already funding this. We already know them. They fund Mecha. They fund La Raza. They fund BLM. This has always been the plan to finally bring the country down. Not to empower these people, but to bring us down. So thank you for proving everything I've warned people about for decades, but I got it all from the Senator Frank Church Committee meetings in the 1970s, 76, 77, 78. I interviewed Anthony frickin' Sutton, the top congressional expert. This was a battle plan hatched in the 50s, okay? Because Henry Ford and others were so mad that I guess Hitler lost. Okay, I mean, folks, learn your damn history. Excuse me. So we're sitting here facing all of this right now, and America was about to be basically executed. It was about to be over, barring civil insurrection. And so balance was restored, okay? And we got a beachhead back in Washington, and they are flipping out, redoubling their race-baiting efforts, going completely crazy. So we didn't start this, but we have to get on the offense and boycott Kellogg's and boycott any of these globalist companies. Miller Brewing. I mean, folks, you go down the list of these. You can go to who funds Black Lives Matter, Mecha, La Raza, you name it. Kellogg's gave them $1 million. Soros has given them $500 million. Ford Foundation, $300 million. Go look it up. These are the dedicated groups sworn to bring fascism to America and to use race baiting and reverse colonialism to bring us down. Okay, you have to understand, it's called liberation theology. None of this is my opinion. This is absolute historical fact. So you see Twitter, you see Facebook, you see Google, all banning people everywhere for no reason. People post American flags and American eagles on Twitter. It's being banned. That's on INFOWARS.com today. They are training you for the massive censorship and the control. So how do we counter this? Well, we have President Trump, even though the Senate's dumb enough to pass this, as soon as he gets in, kills the State Department with a whole new office, hatching all these new bureaucracies and all these agents to come eat out our substance, a.k.a. the Declaration of Independence warned of. He needs to shut that down, and hundreds of other little sub-agencies that, like cancers, are metastasizing. We need to boycott Kellogg's. And I'm calling for everybody. I want an official tweet. I'm putting it out. I'm going to really push to boycott all these companies. We're going to put a list together for next week of the companies to boycott. We're also going to issue our own list of fake news with HUMAT, and the people are going to overpower this Grindle and rip its political arms out by the sockets. It's already happening. You want a war? Believe me, you got one, scum. Thank you for showing us just how authoritarian you are. Assange, after 40 days missing, has now finally resurfaced. Thank God. He has been under house arrest. They weren't letting him talk to media. That's now coming out. He's got to be careful what he says. But I knew something was going on. And he says, listen, the new bombshell is Merkel and the EU super army to take over countries inside the Euro they try to leave peacefully, which never even voted to enter it. See? See? This is global corporate dictatorship through the EU, through the Asian Union, through the North American Union, through the Atlantic Treaty and the TPP that welds the three parts together. Epic history is happening right now. So all of that is unfolding. So, ladies and gentlemen, my main point is this. I heard David Knight talking about this calmly, doing a great job as a gentleman. I thought about myself talking about it gentlemanly the last few days. And I just thought to myself, why are you successful, Alex? Because you genuinely get people out of their trance because you're out of your trance, and you're upset and angry about multinationals coming in to shut down your free speech. That's why I've been successful. That's why we've been able to take action. That's why we're changing the world. We have to get really pissed and not just think everything's okay now that Trump's in. We have to block these type of bizarre agencies that come out and decide that we're going to have state-run controlled media, which Obama talked about in these speeches he gave last week. Hell, Rolling Stone's calling for it. Pathetic, collapsing media wants to shut us down. This is a great honor. But if we don't resist it, they will end up shutting us down, and then Katie barred the door. Now, in a moment, I'm going to play a clip from Democratic House member Emanuel Cleaver on, again, one of the establishment brainwashing channels, saying, listen, the Democrats are in total disarray. We're going to lose this party. It's dying. Yeah, you lost 13 Senate seats, a whole bunch of House seats with 30-something House seats, 900 legislative seats, the record number of gubernatorial seats. People can pull the numbers up for themselves. It's staggering. I'm going from memory, teleprompter free. But one of the biggest sweeps in history. Trump has the trifecta, the legislative, the executive, and the judicial, but a limited window. This is biblical what's happening. I'm going to play this clip of him in a moment and then go back to Lionel and back to David Knight here on the live transmission. And they can obviously debate this and discuss this, but I'm going to be listening to get their take. But you have to understand, folks, that they knew they were dying. They know that all they've got is race baiting. Trump, with Americanism, wants to bring prosperity to everybody and bring us together. This is the antidote to globalism worldwide that uses racial strife and divide and conquer to control everybody. So here he is saying they're on their deathbed. They're imploding. And if the Republican establishment fights against Trump, it's going to be their political deathbed as well. We have to rout these people now forever and restore our republic, and we could save the planet. But we have to believe in it. We have to know how big the stakes are, and we have to realize that the enemy has never been weaker, but has also never been stronger, because now they're completely desperate and not as arrogant as they used to be. So here's the clip of the congressman telling the truth, desperately trying to get them to reorganize a strategy. They can't. They follow the race bait, divide and conquer, grand game, balkanization program that the British used all over the world in the British Empire, but in a modern 2.0 Ford Foundation and Carnegie Endowment. So if people want to understand the battle plan, get this information out to everybody. I've laid out all the names, all the terms, all the facts, who the enemies are. Here is the clip of them on their political deathbed, and then back to David Knight and, of course, Lionel, who's a constitutional lawyer, to break all of this down straight ahead. And then Paul Watson's coming up in the next hour. Stay with us. I'm Alex Jones. Thank you for supporting this broadcast. Spread these links like your lives depend on it, because this is the absolute battle of Americanism versus globalism.
According to President Obama, the real reason Democrats lost the election, Fox News, apparently in an interview with Rolling Stone, he says, I think part of it has to do with our ability, our failure to reach those voters effectively. Part of it is Fox News in every bar and restaurant in big chunks of the country.
You know, it's sad that the president doesn't want the people to know the truth. He said this several years ago when he said, just stop watching Fox News.
Yeah.
He does not want the people to know the truth. And quite honestly, even by its own admission, CNN has been telling half-truths. They've been giving distorted information, and that's what the president doesn't want. If there had been CNN stations in all of these places he claims to have seen, he would have been okay with it.
Yeah, amazing. What are your comments there, Lionel? You know, it's not the economy. It's not the identity politics that have failed. And I said at Election Day, I said, I hope that with the defeat of Hillary Clinton, identity politics becomes as out of fashion as her pantsuits. But it's not those two things. No, it's Fox News. And he doesn't even get specific about what he doesn't like about Fox News. He just attacks them as an entity. That seems to be the strategy.
See, that's the most stupid thing in the world that anybody could do. What I would have done, had I suggested him, but I would have never mentioned Fox News. Never. Yeah. I would have said something like this. I would have said, one of the things that's so important about a republic, not a democracy, but a republic, is to appreciate sometimes change and novelty. And sometimes when people are used to a situation, used to a certain degree of living and peace and prosperity, sometimes they figure, you know what, let's just change things. I would have made the election seem almost like an anomaly. Like a bunch of crazy kids deciding, oh, let's take a new route home tonight. Let's try a new kind of cologne. I would have minimized and trivialized the Trump experiment. I would have said, I would have placated Trump. I would have said, there, you know, it's wonderful. And one thing I'll tell you that I've learned, and Mr. Trump, we wish you the best. Because when you sit in this office, you're going to find out just... There's an old expression, and there's a Sicilian phrase, dal dire al fare c'è di mezzo il mare. From saying into doing, there's the sea in between. And Mr. Trump, you are going to find yourself in the sea. I would have made it sound like, parenthetically, this guy doesn't know what the hell he's doing. I would have never, ever mentioned Fox. In fact, I would have said, I laud people like David Knight and Alex Jones for their little attempts at news. Good for them. You know, I would have
been condescending. Exactly. Yeah.
Condescending. I would have made it change. Like, this is some weird experiment. Hey, look, you want to change some stuff? Go ahead. But I got to tell you something which is really, really important right now. And this is it. And I want everybody to do this. And I'm speaking just for me, not for you. Let us lose the idea of party. Lose the idea of party and who's in, who's out, chairman. I don't give a damn about chairman. I'm a political atheist. I'm making a black belt in realpolitik. I am not into this stuff. Ask yourself very simply this. What is it that matters to you? Now, if somebody decides to come up with a plan that works with your particular worldview, terrific. It may not be Republican, it may not be Democrat, but Hillary Clinton, let's just go back. The reason why she lost is very simple. Number one, she was breathtakingly incoherent. Number two, she was gravely ill. In fact, the Washington Post today had a reference to the fact that the deep, dark recesses of the internet decided to promulgate these lies about her sickness. Where in the hell did that come from? Then she was probably, and I was asking people, one of the most vile and corrupt politicians and candidates, because, you know, we always know, yeah, there's money involved, but I was trying to think who in our relatively recent history compares to her, and I thought Warren Harding. Warren Harding is the only person I can think of in the 20s because, say what you want about Nixon or Johnson, even with Bobby Baker, yeah, Buddy was a part of it, but it was ideology that motivated her. She was nothing but money. Then you had the Clinton Foundation, the CGI, Chai. You also have that, which, by the way, is not going away.
But you know what, Lionel, there was one other thing she didn't have, and that was a strategy or a plan. Everybody was saying Trump has got some really clear strategies and plans. I want to play for you really quickly here a clip from Representative Cleaver, and he admits Democrats don't have a strategy or a plan still. Let's play a quick clip and get your reaction to that.
Sure.
What would the cost have been? You mentioned the cost would have been too high. What would those costs have been?
Well, first of all, if we had elected new leaders to come in, just think they would have been elected yesterday, and they would have had hardly any time to do anything except move into a new office. At the present time, I've got to say, we have no strategy and we have no plan. But at least we have some proven leadership that can, take us into what's going to be a new era. But think about this. We cannot have as our plan to go to the floor for the next 2 years only to hit the ceiling. That's not a plan. That's not a strategy. And that would have been pretty much all we had would have had if we had changed leaders abruptly. I do think it is time for us to bring in younger people in leadership. In fact, if we don't, I think it will spell the demise of the Democratic caucus if we're not already permanently in a state of smallness.
We should bring in young blood, but just not now.
Not at this
yet.
time. Not yet.
Hold on, change is coming.
Okay, now, as they're talking about that, of course, the context is he's saying, we don't have a strategy or a plan, but we got proven leaders. And they're showing pictures of Nancy Pelosi because she just won re-election as the minority leader. She had 30% of the vote defect away from her. But here's a woman who has been, Speaker of the House and minority leader for how many decades? I don't know. I mean, she's been there forever. She's got no strategy or plan. I mean, how is that a proven leadership? You've got no strategy or plan. You've been there forever, Nancy Pelosi, and you still don't have a plan or a strategy.
The plan was very simple. They were anti-Trump. It's like anti-gravity. They were anti-Trump. They talked about his hair, his steaks, his university, his bankruptcies, his family, the way he looks, his orange skin. And he said, great, you keep that up, and I'm going to forge ahead with a plan and with a strategy.
Politics of personal destruction. That's all they had. That and division. And, of course, he talked about that. He said, let's stop focusing on what divides us and talk about what unites us, being Americans, and get our economy working. We're going to be with Lionel in the next section, and then we're going to have in the next hour Paul Joseph Watson. Stay with us. Welcome back to the Alex Jones Show. I'm David Knight, and still with me in this segment, our last segment together, is Lionel. In the next segment, we will have Paul Joseph Watson from London picking up the hosting activities here. As we went to break, Lionel, we were talking about how they don't really have a strategy. They don't have a plan. We just saw a Democrat admit that. He says, hey, but we do have a leader that we've had forever, Nancy Pelosi. She's going to be there, but she's got no strategy, no plan. What we have seen, as you point out, is politics of personal destruction. We see the politics of division sold as a politics of diversity, but it's really about a division, and it's about diversion, isn't it? It's about pushing things away. I mean, how do you see them recouping from this? They don't seem to have learned anything from this last election.
May I try it this way? By the way, let's think of what we would say. Let's assume, God forbid, they would hire you and me to say, listen, you guys know what you're doing. Help us with the Democratic Party. This is our thought experiment for all of the billions of people around the world watching INFOWARS, okay? Here's what I would say. A lie. Just lie. Come up and tell them you have something. Ask what people want. Just go to a mall. Say, what do you care about? Crime, security, my family, taxes, the future, immigration, keep going, drug abuse, throw someone in, pets, I don't care, diet, throw in whatever you want. And then say, Hillary, go up and lie. Just say you're going to tackle and have something nominal. Don't just say, point to my website. That was her big thing. Well, if you go to my website, if you go to my website, when she wasn't gravely ill, when she was able to actually speak to people, I wasn't gone AWOL for 200 days. So, and I'm not kidding. I would have lied. I would have said, well, I'm going to say something. I'm going to say what I'm going to do about it. Name it. What happened was there was a sense of entitlement. When I was a prosecutor, I used to run into every now and then these people who thought they were bulletproof and invisible. Seriously, there were like bank robbers who would walk in. I'm saying, you again? Why did you do this? Why did you go to the place where they knew you? Because I got away with it once, and I did it twice, and I did it again, and I felt like maybe I'm just invisible. Because she had been told for so long, Hillary, this is your time. Hillary, how do you think she could have squirreled all that money away? How do you think she could have basically bamboozled people with forcing them to donate to the Clinton Foundation and pay $250,000 for her speeches? Because she was so good at saying, no, Mr. Knight, you don't understand something. I'm going to be the president. I'm not going to be indicted. It ain't going to happen. And Bernie, you can do all your stuff with all your millennials and Trump, and I don't give a damn what. You might as well just give me the crown now, because I got news for you. I'm on a fast track to the presidency. I mean, the Pope.
Well, it was a rigged system.
The Vatican can't do this.
It was a rigged system, and she knew it. She had the DNC rigged for her. She had the media rigging it for her, feeding her answers in the background and everything. You know, I think you were onto something. She could have gone out and asked people, you know, what are you concerned about? And she could have lied to them and said, I share your concerns. I'm going to do this and that. But instead, she just ignored, didn't even pretend to care what the people wanted. It was all about her own personal privilege and entitlement.
And I would have also told you, if you were, God forbid, David, let's say you were Hillary Clinton, and I'd say, whoa, Mr. Knight, come here for a second. Listen, don't say anything about forcing Trump to agree to accept the results of the election because, Mr. Knight, I know this may be hard for you to believe, but you may not win. Yeah. And we may have to, you know, I know that sounds crazy. I know I'm crazy to even suggest that. I'm out of my mind. I've been hitting it pretty hard, but don't say that. No, they didn't.
She made the rope that she hung herself with, didn't she? You know?
Then, right, and then what happened was, whenever there was this guy, this man who basically asked people and said so plainly, I'm going to tear up TPP. I'm going to get your, you know, I thought, you know what? If you can do it, great, but damn it, it's a plan.
Yeah.
Meanwhile,
he had a strategy. He had a plan. Yeah, thank you so much. We're talking to Lionel, LionelMedia.com, and you can find him on Twitter at Lionel Media. Thank you, Lionel. Coming up, Paul Joseph Watson.
We're live the fourth hour of the Alex Jones Show on this Friday edition, and it's been another week of hot losers trying to overturn election results, trying to overturn democratic referendums. We've got yet another example of that today with Brexit, which I'm going to get onto. Absolutely sick of talking about it at this point. It was in June. We're now 5 months later, nearly 6 months later. There's still no actual date on when Article 50 will be triggered and that Brexit, the whole process, will begin. No date set whatsoever. They're still putting in roadblocks. They're still trying to get a second referendum. They're hailing inconsequential by-election results in Remain strongholds and hailing them as a sea change in the national sentiment. Absolute, complete BS. But BBC News, Sky News is regurgitating it without question, as you would expect. Meanwhile, Jill Stein, the political failure who got about 1% of the vote and who nobody cares about, who her own Green Party has now publicly abandoned her, she's still carrying on with her useless, pointless recount, which has no other purpose than trying to prevent Donald Trump from winning the election fairly, legitimately, trying to derail his credibility as he heads towards the inauguration. Well, the Wisconsin recount has started, and in one county, they tallied up the votes once again. Hillary Clinton finished up with one extra vote. That's right, one extra vote. I think they tallied it up and they said the vote would have to continue for about another 70 years at the same course for Hillary Clinton to overturn Donald Trump's margin of victory, just in Wisconsin alone. So maybe they can keep this going for 70 years. Maybe that's long enough for them to overturn it. And, you know, they'll probably be happy to do that because, God forbid, they would accept the fair result of a democratic election. That's not what the Democratic Party is all about. A Michigan attorney, the Attorney General, has filed a lawsuit to halt the recount. This is Michigan Attorney General Bill Schotter filed a lawsuit to stop the recount there, a move that came hours after Trump attorneys had filed a complaint to block the proceedings. So, you know, it's going to be harder for them to do it in Michigan. It's going to be even harder for them to do it in Pennsylvania. But they're dang well gonna try because they hate democracy. They're sore losers and they're not going to give it up very easily. In fact, we had the story yesterday. You've got electors now reportedly planning, scheming, a coalition of them to vote against the will of the residents of their own state. So in states that Trump won, these electors on December 19th are not going to vote for him. The question is, how many are going to do that? We saw a report out of Texas where one elector says he's not going to vote for Trump because of biblical reasons, whatever the hell that means. I mean, Christians are being slaughtered in the Middle East on a daily basis. Trump says he wants to do something about that. Somehow that's un-Christian. God knows how that works. He's not going to vote for Trump. We've got reports of other electors that are getting together again in a coalition and saying that they're not going to vote for Trump on December 19th. Is it 15? Is it less than 15? Are there two groups of electors, one of 15, one of 9, 10, 11, 12? We don't know because they haven't gone public. Now it's about, what, 2.5, 3 weeks before the Electoral College meets. Will one of them go public? Because you can bet your bottom dollar that when he or she does, they will get endless media attention, as many interviews as they need on all the major networks to then try and convince other electors to vote their conscience. In other words, to vote against tens of millions of American people who voted for Donald Trump in a fair election. They will get all the media attention they need, which will then serve, perhaps, to convince other electors to do the same. Is it likely to happen? No. It's a complete long shot. It's a Hail Mary, but again, it illustrates the complete desperation of Democrats, of leftists, and the severity of the butthurt, the sore losers who whined for weeks about us not accepting the results of the election. Oh, the right-wingers, they're going to go out and riot if they lose this election. Who went out and rioted? Oh, it was you. Hillary Clinton. Donald Trump is a threat to democracy. He refuses to accept the election result. 1 week after the election result, oh, look, Hillary Clinton's involved in this recount. What a surprise. So we've got Hillary ahead by 1 vote. They found 1 vote for her. Obviously didn't fill in enough blank ballots there, Hillary. They found 1 extra vote for Hillary Clinton in this Wisconsin Menominee County. 17 extra votes for Jill Stein, 12 for Libertarian Gary Johnson. Again, I think the estimate was this vote would have to go on for 70-odd years at that rate for Hillary Clinton to overturn Donald Trump's margin of victory. We have a petition, which is the most popular petition ever, that calls to install Hillary Clinton as president. It's entitled Make Hillary Clinton President, posted at change.org. Now has a total of over 4.6 million signatories at the time of writing, making it the most popular petition in the website's history. It's a shame that all the idiots who signed that petition were too lazy to get off their butts and vote 3 weeks ago, isn't it? Yeah, actually leaving the house and filling in a piece of paper, that was too much for them in their weed-addled stupor. But they can click a few buttons and sign a petition on the internet and think that that has some kind of weight or importance. It doesn't. The same person probably signed it thousands of times. Remember the second referendum petitions after Brexit, where they had millions of people sign those? Turned out that the majority of signatures were from people living in foreign countries who could have never voted for Brexit in the first place. But they think that having a petition on change.org has some kind of weight or importance. It doesn't. The American Mirror reports Obama worshippers chant 4 more years at White House Christmas tree lighting. There's only 48 days more for Obama bots to chant admiration for their dear leader. They made the most of it as President Obama and his family lit the national Christmas tree outside the White House last night. Attendees could be heard chanting 4 more years during the ceremony. Again, if you put a referendum to these people, asking them if they wanted Obama to be a lifetime dictator like Kim Jong-il or Kim Jong-un, the vast majority of them would sign it. And they still call themselves Democrats. Oh, the irony. But Brexit, basically, there was a by-election. The results were announced this morning. Now, bearing in mind, they had a high court ruling which said that the government had to pass a parliamentary vote before Brexit could be triggered. That's not what the referendum said. And that those judges were all corrupt EU sycophants and lackeys. The same thing is going to happen with the Supreme Court judgment here in a couple of days' time. So they had that already going on in the background. So they had a by-election in an area of London called Richmond, which voted 70% Remain. And a candidate who won with less than 50% of the vote supported Remain. So then all the media came out and said that this was a stunning repudiation of Brexit sentiment across the country. Okay, so an area in which 70% of the population voted Remain votes for somebody who gets less than 50% of the vote, and that represents the entirety of the country. and how they've suddenly changed their mind on Brexit. Give me a break. Okay? Sky News, which is worse than the BBC in many aspects. They lie consistently about Brexit. Lib Dems vow to fight hard Brexit after Richmond by-election win. The Liberal Democrats have vowed to fight against a hard Brexit in the aftermath of the party's stunning victory. It was absolutely stunning. It was like 20,000 votes. Oh, my God. Compared to 17.4 million British people who voted for Brexit. Yet they're saying that this is a stunning victory. It's a massive sea change in the entire sentiment of the country. So this MP called Sarah Olney, who then later gave a radio interview in which she walked off because she had zero knowledge of the EU, of the actual issues relating to the referendum. She won a by-election and then got on the media and said that this result paved the way for Parliament to, quote, override the EU referendum result. Isn't that ironic that she's a member of the Liberal Democrats, keyword being Democrats, and she's on the media talking about overriding the democratic will of the British people? Give me strength. But again, this is monumental. 20,000 people voted for her. And again, where's the second vote, right? This is the same woman who called for a second referendum immediately after Brexit. Now, these people were low information who voted in Richmond. They were swayed, they were deluded by lies from extreme left-wing propaganda outlets like The Guardian. So I think it's only fair that we have a second vote. I mean, who would oppose that? Only people who hate democracy would oppose that. Only intolerant bigots would oppose that. So she walked off this interview. Again, it's a Remain area. No surprise whatsoever, yet the media is hailing it as this massive sea change in the sentiment of the country. Such BS. How on earth is that a reversal of Brexit sentiment when the people in the area voted 70% for Brexit? Oh, and by the way, those are the same people who lectured the rest of the country about how intolerant and bigoted they were because they were anti-mass immigration. This is literally the whitest area of London. So they preach all day about the virtues, the wonders of mass immigration, while choosing to live in the whitest area possible. And that is the root of their hypocrisy. We'll be back on the Alex Jones Show live. Don't go away. We're back on the Alex Jones Show live. So basically we have a conservative populist revolution sweeping Europe, sweeping the West, illustrated by the success of Donald Trump, illustrated by the fact that Francois Hollande, the socialist French president who has completely ruined that country, basically turned it into one giant Islamic ghetto, now has 4% approval rating and is so despised in France that for the first time ever in the history of the Fifth Republic of France, the sitting president is not going to run for re-election because he's that unpopular. He's wrecked the country to such a degree that he has no chance whatsoever of winning. So then they've got this Fillon candidate in there who's basically all talk and no action. He says he's going to take on radical Islam, has no actual policy on how to do that. Obviously a ringer to try and distract from, to try and derail the success of Marine Le Pen. We've got a situation over in Italy where they have a huge rejection, repudiation of the government coming up if polls are to be believed on Sunday. Again, they fear it could destroy the European Union, like that's a bad thing. So we have this conservative populist revolution sweeping Europe. And in the UK, they have one by-election victory because the Conservative member stood down from the Conservative Party and ran as an independent, Zach Goldsmith, who specializes in losing elections. They win this election. About 20,000 people vote for this Liberal Democrat who wants to override the democratic will of the British people. And the media comes out and says it's a historic moment for the country. One little area that voted 70% Remain in the first place votes as you would expect for this Remain candidate, but it's a stunning rejection of Brexit. The media is literally telling British people that 20,000 posh lefties in Richmond represent the country better than 17.4 million Brexit voters. Absolutely insane level of propaganda, but you're never going to hear a word against it because we don't have a real media in this country that isn't completely biased and left-wing. Sky News feigns as if it's right of the BBC when it's even worse than the BBC. There's no news station like Fox News, which isn't brilliant, but at least it's something. There's absolutely nothing like that in the United Kingdom, and people just don't hear this kind of information. The Telegraph reports top EU official claims shock result is a win for Remain, as Ian Duncan Smith tells him to mind his own bloody business. And this is Guy Verhofstadt, the rat-faced, unelected bureaucrat, former commie, who sits in the EU, is now sticking his nose into British by-elections, gloating about how this is such a massive victory. Philip Davis, another Conservative MP, said, "I am happy for them to make this result a referendum on the EU. As the EU referendum, over 70% voted for Remain. At this by-election, the Lib Dems got less than 50%. Seems like a big swing from Remain to Leave." So again, they got 20% less of the vote than they did for Remain in this same area. But these unelected rat-faced commie bureaucrats in the EU are hailing it as a repudiation of Brexit. Well, it's anything but. So again, you've got that going on. You have a situation in Canada where their taxpayer-funded news network, CBC, has produced what can only be described as an absolutely bizarre racist video. This is out of Information Liberation. Canadian state TV hails beige horizon with no white people. Imagine if a taxpayer-funded news network, television network, came out with a rap video hailing the extinction of black people. I mean, how would that fly? Yet the CBC has produced a bizarre music video hailing an inevitable future where white people are made extinct. Actually use racist terms like Mexi Jews, chonkies, and Beaner schnitzels while attacking Donald Trump and Stephen Bannon as racists for their perceived relationship with the alt-right. So again, these are the people who celebrate diversity, yet in the very lyrics of this racist rap song, they say they're looking forward to the day where everyone looks the same. Really? That's diversity, is it? Everyone looking the same? I suppose they all have the same opinions too, because you won't tolerate diversity of opinion, will you? Again, this was on YouTube. It got 16,000 downvotes compared to just 82 upvotes. And the comments were so vitriolic, they had to disable the comments. One of the comments said, the video highlighted a contradiction with the idea that race doesn't exist, but white people alone need to die. So again, it's this idea that the last acceptable form of racism is racism against white people. We're all for diversity, apart from white people. They all need to die. That is CBC. We'll be back on the Alex Jones Show. Don't go away.
My friends, Alex Jones here with one final message for this Friday worldwide broadcast, and it's this. I am very thankful for this audience. I'm very thankful to the great crew and people like Paul Watson. I am very thankful to your prayers and support, and I'm very thankful to our founders who laid down the right of free speech and the right to assemble, the right of private property, and of course, the right to not just defend ourselves with free speech, but also defend ourselves physically as a last resort. And of course, they didn't give us those rights. They simply laid out some of the basic known rights under common law and under natural law and common sense. And we need to see a return to that. But the reason I wanted to add this addendum, earlier I discussed the fact that we have to now boycott Kellogg's and every other globalist organization that is openly funding the end of free press in this country while funding radical terroristic groups that are out killing police officers. And this is a foreign takeover. That is not rhetoric. This is really happening. And there's one other big piece I didn't get to dealing with this congressional funding that passed the House for $170 million for a domestic news control system that makes Operation Mockingbird by the CIA pale in significance. And that's that we also have Yahoo coming out, and I've seen other publications saying this, that they have to start indoctrinating children in school against fake news. yeah, you'll probably tell us there's no such thing as the Bilderberg Group, or that Obamacare's free, or that Trump's going to lose the election, and put out some fake polls. This really is the dying gasp of these people, but they could lash out and really hurt us. That's why I'm saying everybody's done a great job, but you've got to intensify what you're doing. And if you're black, you got to reach out to folks that are white and Hispanic. If you're white, you got to do vice versa, Hispanic, vice versa. They are just sowing the seeds of such division and such pain and such mental illness in a desperate attempt to keep us from discovering true free market that is so much better than globalism and total enslavement. But man, when you're talking about openly state-run media, we already know from WikiLeaks that CNN, ABC, CBS, MSNBC are basically state-run. But now it's going to be so much worse with them openly coordinating, and Obama calling for state funding in Rolling Stone earlier this week to run state-run media. I mean, this is so classically dangerous and authoritarian. And so that's why it's so important that everybody realize that we have a case of political cancer, and so does Europe, and we have to get rid of these arrogant, unelected, out-of-control organizations. It is so imperative. I want to get Paul Watson's take on this as he goes on to other news today, and, of course, the other great hosts that have done a great job roundtabling, like David Knight, Lionel, and so many others. And then, of course, I'll be back this Sunday, 4 to 6 p.m. Central Standard Time. Again, Lord willing, because in days like this, who knows? That's why I want to thank you all for your support over the years, and just want to ask you to intensify your support, spreading the videos, the articles, purchasing the products, supporting our sponsors, because this is an all-out war. And it's not exhausting to fight this war. It's animating. It's exciting. Wild horses cannot drag me away. And so, again, I salute you all. I thank you, and I love you all. Alex Jones, signing off for InfoWars.com.
And Alex mentioned there a headline, which we've got up on InfoWars.com. Yahoo News columnist wants schools to indoctrinate kids to trust mainstream media. This is the solution to fake news. Or in other words, the fact that we're kicking their butt on every single front, winning the info war, as Hillary Clinton lamented years ago. With trust in mainstream media outlets plunging to historic lows, a Yahoo News columnist has an ingenious idea to restore faith in the MSM. Indoctrinate children in schools to only place confidence in the corporate press. So he wants basically a media literacy class, mandatory in all schools, all high schools, so that youngsters just get a sense of what's real news and what's fake news. Of course, the only news they can trust is the Washington Post, is Yahoo News. Well, what a surprise. Again, how about this? How about instead of labeling everyone who has a different opinion as fake news, how about you stop lying? You know, he uses the example of the Washington Post article, which had this prop or not fake news list, Russian propaganda list. That article has been vehemently debunked and eviscerated by innumerable different news outlets since it came out. They put left-wing news websites on this list that were mildly critical of Hillary Clinton and called it Russian propaganda. That's propaganda right there. That is state propaganda. That is Democratic Party propaganda. You're the fake news. They're the fake news while pointing fingers all day, telling us that we are the fake news. The difference between fake news, which does exist, there are fake news websites that put out fake news to make money. The difference is the most harm that happens with fake news is they make a few advertising dollars. When the mainstream media puts out fake news, hundreds of thousands of people die. Okay? That's the frigging difference. You put out fake news about mobile biological weapons laboratories. You know, Saddam Hussein's drone aircraft that can spray anthrax over wide areas. Complete BS. Colin Powell holding up a vial of anthrax in front of the UN. Complete BS. Saying that Iraq had these mobile weapons labs based on known liars as sources. Okay? That's fake news. You put it out, Washington Post, New York Times, hundreds of thousands of people died. That is the difference. You can talk about Dan Rather. You can talk about Brian Williams. Talk about Hillary Clinton being under, fake sniper fire. Again, that's fake news. That has real consequences. People making a few advertising bucks off some made-up headlines isn't really much of a threat unless you then try and exploit that as the mainstream media, as you've lost all your trust and credibility because you lie and come out with fake news. You can exploit that and use it, again, to blacklist your detractors as fake news along with actual fake news, when in reality it's basically anyone who has a different opinion. Look, I'm still waiting for my check from the Kremlin, but it hasn't arrived yet. I mean, I'm sick of reading how, oh, you're a cook because you don't say that white supremacy is the way to go. You're a cook. You're being controlled by the left. And then the left says, oh, you're a neo-Nazi. You're a bigot. I'm sick of it. Okay? We try to tell the truth as we see it. Do we make mistakes? Yes. Do we deliberately create fake headlines and fake stories for advertising dollars? No, we don't need to. We make our own money, and it doesn't come in the form of checks from corrupt governments. Unlike CNN, of course, which takes checks from the corrupt dictatorship of Bahrain to make puff-piece propaganda programs about how great their government is, while they're literally killing protesters on the streets, okay? We don't need that money. We don't take those checks. You do. You're the fake news. Before we get back into the news, I want to tell you about InfoWarsStore.com again. This is how we make money. We don't take checks from George Soros, like Black Lives Matter, like MoveOn.org. This is how we make money. This is how we buy the cameras. This is how we pay tens of thousands in bandwidth costs every week. This is how we pay our staff of writers, of reporters. This is how we become a real news organization that takes on the mainstream media, is by selling vitamin products. Oh, God forbid. So please support us by getting the products at InfoWarsLife.com, where we have vitamin mineral fusion drink. And, just appreciate this, because over in the EU, they've basically banned vitamins in any kind of high strength, so you can't even get them anymore. So before, the authoritarians come for this, just appreciate what you can get at InfoWarsLife.com. And this is the affordable and great-tasting vitamin mineral fusion drink. It's back in stock. It's loaded with a full month's supply of essential vitamins, minerals, and amino acids that your body needs. The best part is the ingredients in vitamin mineral fusion are either plant-derived or of the highest quality lab standard. We're talking vitamin C, vitamin E, zinc, magnesium, selenium, L-glutamine, folic acid, calcium, and many others. Again, this is a limited run. It won't be there for long. It's available at InfoWarsLife.com. God forbid you would make yourself want to feel a little bit better and improve your health while supporting our network. God forbid you would want to do that. We're so discredited because we sell vitamins. God forbid, shame on us. We don't take checks from corrupt Gulf state dictatorships or billionaire globalist financiers like MoveOn.org, like Media Matters, like Think Progress, but they're so credible, we're fake news. Okay, let's get back into the real news. Again, Brexit is going on. They're trying to sabotage that. It's not happening once again. You've got a cooked conservative government, many of whom campaigned against Brexit in the first place, now being tasked with carrying it out. Meanwhile, in Ohio earlier this week, we had a terrorist ram innocent people with a vehicle, then get out and start slashing them. It's since turned out that, imagine my shock, he was a social justice warrior. That's right. Remember, we had the ISIS manifesto back, I think it was about 6-7 months ago now, where they actually came out and said, this was ISIS in their own manifesto. They came out and said, left-wing social justice activists broadly share the same goals as jihadists. So let's take over Europe, recruit them, radicalize them, and arm them to carry out violent terrorist attacks. Because again, social justice warriors and jihadists broadly share the same goals. Not my words, the words of ISIS in their own manifesto. So no surprise that we had that happen again earlier this week at Ohio State University, where it turned out that the terrorist, Mr. Artan, the peace-loving, religion of peace Somali immigrant, was studying microaggressions as part of his university course. Microaggressions is this bizarre branch of political correctness, which basically says a white person smiling at a black person is a microaggression. It's politically incorrect. Again, anything that could be taken as offensive towards any minority whatsoever, any kind of mundane phrase or behavior, that's a microaggression. That's what Mr. Artan jihadist was studying right before this attack. The same guy who was whining about Islamophobia and Muslims being mistreated right before the attack. Part of his radicalization process came from his involvement in social justice issues. We now have a direct connection between jihadism and social justice warriors, and it's not the first time this has happened. But Faith Goldie of Rebel Media went to the university, talked to people, and just wait and see what they said. Let's roll this clip.
I'm here at Ohio State University, which has just become the setting of ISIS's most recent terrorist attack on U.S. soil, committed by one Abdul Artan. He's a Somalian refugee. Now, it should be pointed out that this terrorist attack comes just 2 months after another knife terrorist attack in Minnesota that was perpetrated by the son of Somalian refugees. So I figured we'd walk around campus and ask students if they're shaken up by recent events here in their own backyard, or if the occasional terrorist attack is just a small price we have to pay for multiculturalism. You feel safe on campus after the attack this week?
Yep.
You do? Would you call it a terrorist attack?
Depends on what your definition of terrorism is.
According to your definition.
No.
Would you call what happened terrorism?
I don't know what happened yet. I don't know what it's about, and I think we still have a lot to learn about the incident.
ISIS has claimed responsibility.
I do realize that, but that doesn't always mean that's what necessarily happened.
Would you call this terrorism?
I'm not sure. I've been just kind of like keeping updated with the news. I'm not sure if they've confirmed that or denied that.
ISIS claimed responsibility.
Yeah, so I don't know.
Would you call what happened terrorism?
No, I wouldn't. No. I would say it was a misunderstanding.
Misunderstanding? Why would you say that?
Because I think that person probably experienced a lot of racism, and racism is a traumatic experience. And I hope that people that look like him and who don't look like me feel safe on campus too.
Do you think that it's fair game to bring up his religion?
I mean, I think that it's kind of dangerous to bring up his religion because, yeah, he was a Muslim and that, but, that doesn't mean that all Muslims are bad and we should be afraid of all of them.
Do you think it's fair game to bring up the man's religion?
I mean, I think that needs to be separate from the rest of what you're looking at. I think if it's clear that it's a terrorist attack, as far as how it was inspired, then I think you go off of that and not off of religion.
I guess I would say, until we know more what role his religion played in the incident, if any, I think we can stay away from that.
Did you read his Facebook post that he posted right before committing the attack?
Yeah. I think they're ambiguous. I mean, lots of people probably say those same sorts of things, probably hundreds of thousands of people, and don't do terrorist attacks. So I'm not sure that they're related.
Now, do you think that this is just a sort of thing that we're going to have to accept going forward? Is just a price to pay for being a multicultural, diverse, and tolerant society?
I mean, yeah, probably. When you're accepting people from all different, walks of life and different races and religions, there are bad people. Sometimes people are bad. And, it's going to happen. It's not because one group is worse than another. It's just because bad people exist.
So you would say that Islam's the same as any other religion?
Yeah. There are radical Christians, and just any religion is going to have extremists, and just because they're Muslim doesn't mean that suddenly all Muslims are bad.
Who do you think is the bigger victim here, the 11 injured or the Somali community who's lost someone?
Well, obviously I hate to rank victimhood. The people who got hurt, that was terrible. And the good news is I think they're all going to recover. The Somali community, I think a lot of, I feel sorry. We'll know more when we know what happened and what was going on. I hope that they can recover from this as well. I'm sure that, the man's family evidently didn't know anything about this. I'm sure that they felt horrible to lose their son and brother and so forth. So I think, there's a lot of sympathy to go around, I guess.
Are you a student here?
No, I'm a faculty member.
Well, you can chalk it up to ignorance, inhibition, or even indoctrination, but it would seem folks here on the ground at OSU are unwilling to admit, to come to terms, and to cope with the fact that Islamic terrorists have just targeted their own backyard.
So again, the guy wrote a Facebook post saying why he did this. He wanted to kill the infidels. ISIS claimed responsibility, but God forbid you would mention that he was a Muslim, because that has nothing whatsoever to do with it. Of course, what has more to do with it is the fact that America is racist, and that's what made him carry out this attack. In fact, America is so racist that it gave this guy free healthcare, free housing, free education, and food stamps. But that just wasn't quite enough, was it? Still a little bit too much racism towards this individual. And that, according to these students at Ohio State University, justified the attack. This is the insanity that we are up against. We're going to get back into it after the break on the final segment of the Alex Jones Show. Breaking news at INFOWARS.com. Don't go away. We're back live for the final segment of the Alex Jones Show, and as you heard before the break again, Islam had nothing to do with the attack at Ohio State University earlier this week, even though Tucker wrote a Facebook post explaining how he wanted to kill the infidels, even though the Islamic State, the day after the attack, claimed it as their own. But again, it's taboo to even mention the word Islam. And in fact, isn't it America that's to blame for an Islamic radical ramming a car into innocent people and then slashing them? Isn't it Americans that are to blame for that? They were a little bit too racist, didn't give him enough food stamps, didn't give him enough free education, housing, or healthcare. A little bit racist there. And we should be thinking about mean tweets about all the American migrants in the aftermath of this. We should be sympathizing with the terrorist family, really, shouldn't we? Not the actual victims of the terrorist attack. Yes, that's what they actually said in that clip. These universities are the breeding grounds for absolute unbridled insanity. And we've kind of eviscerated it in the popular culture to some extent. We've kind of eviscerated it in the media world, but it's still as virulent as ever in these universities. And in fact, the day after this attack, NPR gave a platform to another Somali migrant who basically came out and said that, again, unpleasant tweets and perhaps mean stares were the biggest threat in the aftermath of this attack. Not the fact that these attacks are now happening on a regular basis. You had a Somali American migrant in a mall, I believe it was in Minneapolis, just a few months before this, again, go on a rampage, thankfully shot dead by a responsible person with a gun. This is happening more and more frequently, but they're now saying that it's racist to even mention any connection whatsoever to Islam, while the attacker makes Facebook posts about how it's driven by Islam, and while the Islamic State claims responsibility. Meanwhile, you've got a group which has come out with basically a propaganda ad that says, it's time we all take a stand against hate. It's time we all spread love. Basically, again, blaming this attack on the intolerance of Americans. Well, I would argue that stabbing a bunch of people for not believing the same thing of you is the very definition of hatred. And really, that's what we should be worried about. FBI says San Bernardino terrorists were triggered by Christmas meeting. Now, we heard reports about this at the time of the San Bernardino attack last year. Now it's been confirmed. Again, the attackers, Tashfeen Malik, was ordered, along with Farouk, to attend a Christmas meeting. Wasn't even a Christmas party, just a Christmas meeting of fellow county employees in front of a Christmas tree in a conference room. And that is what triggered them to plan this massacre. I guess the solution to that, if you ask the students there at Ohio State University, would be just to ban Christmas, right? Well, that's happening at other universities. Campus Reform reports no religious icons during Christmas, colleges tell students. They're basically saying you can't have nativity scenes, you can't have anything related to Christianity, no crosses, no Bibles, no Jesus. You can have bells, you can have winter scenes again, because God forbid somebody might get offended. So again, every year the left proclaims the war on Christmas to be a ludicrous conspiracy theory while declaring war on Christmas. And it's funny, if you go and ask Muslims about this, whether they care, in every instance that I've seen, none of them even care. Who's offended here? Again, it's white lefty liberals being offended on behalf of other people, the bigotry of low expectations. But that's going to wrap it up for the show. Breaking news at Infowars.com. Alex will be back with the Sunday show. That's going to do it for now. Thanks for joining us.